Chapter 327. What do these lips taste like? Beside the bed shrouded by the gauze curtain, the black-haired girl stared at the young man's lips and let her imagination run wild. Is it sweet or bitter? Is it cool or hot? Can it ease the scorching heat in her heart a little, or will it intensify until it erupts completely? Lillian Aikman didn't know the answer to these questions, but her body was slowly leaning forward. Their lips were getting closer and closer, and when they were 20 centimeters away from Luo Ye's cheek, the young man let out an unconscious moan. The moment she heard Luo Ye's moan, the girl, who intended to steal a kiss, stood up abruptly. Her fiery brain instantly sobered up as though a bucket of cold water had been poured over it. Fortunately, this action didn't fall into Luo Ye's eyes. The young man just let out a little sound and fell asleep again. Huff, huff. Seeing Luo Ye fall into silence again, the girl, who was breathing rapidly, was slightly relieved. After staring blankly at the young man for a long time, the girl stretched out her hand to cover her cheek and muttered to herself, "No, that's not right. What am I doing?" Since Luo Ye's problem until now, Lillian had been examining her inner self for more than 2 hours and had to admit that she was a little abnormal. Roha's body had a certain degree of charm, there was no doubt about it. But as a third-level source-level transcendent, without touching his body, the charm's effect wouldn't be very good, it might even have no effect. In other words, Lillian's current state wasn't due to external factors, but more due to internal factors, such as some special preferences. 328. And Luo Ye's current situation, in the room, to a certain extent, the black-haired young lady stared at the witch beside the bed and frowned. Lillian didn't know how to describe this strong burning desire to protect. She pondered for a while and wanted to wrap him up without any reason. But she knew that this was abnormal, very guarded especially person. The greed for the young man's body. I'm afraid you don't know that, right? It was undoubtedly something that an elder sister shouldn't do. Blood relations on the other hand, really convenient. The stimulation called the connection betrayal he can gain constantly provoking her and even let you, making her someone feel who doesn't really understand him, go deep into his heart. As an elder sister, looking at the young lady's puzzled expression, I shouldn't have done this. Altacia twirled her hair with her fingers in dissatisfaction and said with a cold expression. Breathing quickened as she stared at the figure on the bed. The living environment hands reached out to grab onto Luo Ye's. So you probably don't understand how difficult it is for Sir Hero to survive until now as an awakened of your race. Completely exposed. The malice he faces is far beyond your imagination. She was afraid that she would no longer be able to resist her desire to get close to him, all the difficulties to come to me alone without any guidance or documentation. Weren't related by blood. It's a situation that can be considered miraculous. Luo Ye should also see her as her elder sister. He has a very guarded heart. But at the thought of having sex with Luo Ye, blood relations, and the feeling of you sacrificing your life for him, but a strange battle allowed you to break through that thick defense. Her hand that held the youth's messy clothes trembled incessantly. Narrowed her eyes slightly and curled the corners of her lips. But after a few minutes, you need to make him fall in love with you. Eyes not only the love between her siblings, but also the love between a man and a woman. Otherwise, thought in mind, you will walk toward destruction in disappointment. But to her surprise, she heard a woman's voice. Lillian knit her brows. The white-haired witch shook her head to endure it. You should also understand that you can't stay by his side forever. The moment she heard the familiar voice of blood relations, pupils shrank abruptly. This separation may be nothing to others, but you definitely can't endure from her fingertips and transformed into a sword that she pointed behind her. Behind her, the white-haired, kind of red-eyed demoness, Altacia said as she stood up and approached Lillian. "Oh, her scarlet pupils met Lillian's purple pupils as she spoke softly in a pleasant voice. Demoness. Don't worry, Lillian. The black-haired young girl actually pointed her characteristics of a witch. In midair. Like us, she was vigilant and puzzled at the same time. Can't extricate yourself. After Luo Ye's body, you should have realized that you are abnormal due to the side effects. The youth's bloodline abilities were almost completely sealed. Vaguely aware of the special feelings and hobbies in her heart, let alone the young lady's eyes trembled slightly before she denied it. But what she didn't expect was that the demoness narrowed her eyes gently placed her hand on Lillian's shoulder and whispered into her ear on the bed before looking at Lillian. The reason why you can't stand it is very simple. Happily, it's because you have too little desire in your heart. Do you still remember the spell that allowed you to combine your powers? Others might be able to eliminate this love through other methods and desires. Yours. But you will only accumulate it until the day that love Lillian couldn't devours you. But widen her eyes. Let me think. Altacia chuckled. Or 20 years. By then, you should already be the emperor of a massive empire. But unfortunately, the pain and torment of separation will definitely turn you into a tyrant. You will definitely do things that will plunge the people into misery and suffering. It's only a matter of time before you become his enemy. Unfortunately, Lord Hero can't stop you because he will be soft-hearted at critical moments. He won't be able to kill you, so you will definitely use this advantage to defeat him. By then, your twisted love will definitely make you kill all the women around him. What will happen if you lose control of your possessiveness? Imprisonment? He will definitely hate you, but you will be the only one by his side. Both of you will struggle between love and hate, and then provide each other with warmth. Heh, what a sadomasochistic love that one can't extricate oneself from. The witch relished in her prophecy. Along with Altatia's words, Lillian's eyes gradually widened, and then she couldn't help but waver. No, shut up. I can't possibly. Don't answer yet, Lillian. Gazing at the agitated black-haired young lady, Altatia placed her finger on her lips, narrowed her eyes, and smiled. Nothing has happened yet. What I'm saying is nothing more than my prediction of the future. But you should understand by now how big the possibility of this prediction is. After all, you were tempted, weren't you? The moment the witch spoke, Lillian's body trembled, and her purple pupils shrunk abruptly. That's right. The reason why Lillian wavered was because after listening to this terrifying story, she didn't know where the anticipation and desire arose in her heart. Although it wasn't much, it proved that such dark thoughts did indeed exist in her heart. Her inner reaction left the young lady speechless. The white-haired witch smiled, took 2 steps back and consoled her. It's all right. Humans are creatures of both good and evil. If you don't like to become a tyrant, then you can only conquer him. Especially now, when you have the best chance. Chapter 329. My body is so heavy. In his hazy consciousness, Luo Ye slowly opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling that he had never seen before. It was a pure white cloth with a faint golden pattern. It had a soft texture that made people want to touch it, and there was a white gauze curtain fluttering beside it. Looking at this scene that he had never seen before, Luo Ye was slightly stunned, and then his slow brain slowly turned. No, it's not a ceiling, this is the ceiling of a princess bed? Although he had never slept on a princess bed before, Luo Ye, who was experienced and knowledgeable, quickly recognized the origin of the cloth. He looked around in confusion, but the scene he saw surprised him. It's so far from both sides, and the bed is so big. Wait, the clothes are so loose. Oh, it must have been torn during the battle. With this thought in mind, the black-haired teenager observed his surroundings and sat up with his hands on the bed. He squinted his cute eyes and rubbed his messy hair. He felt dizzy until the breeze outside the window blew up the gauze curtain in front of him. A cute figure suddenly appeared in the mirror of the dressing table opposite him. It was a child about 7 or 8 years old, like a pure-blooded elf in a fairy tale. He had pearl-white skin, cat-like golden eyes, and vermilion lips with a faint luster. His lazy appearance as if he had just woken up made people want to hug him. The moment he saw the stranger, Luo Ye's consciousness quickly woke up. He opened his eyes wide and hurriedly looked around, but the result made him stunned. Where is he? I did see a child just now. Wait. Halfway through his thoughts, the young man suddenly had a premonition of the truth. He lowered his head and looked at his loose but intact clothes. He then opened his hand and looked at his small palm. Suddenly his eyes widened. He hurriedly crawled to the bed and pulled open the curtain to look at the mirror. This is me. Luo Ye, who finally uncovered the truth, stared at himself in the mirror and fell into a daze, and the reason for this instantly flashed through his mind. It's a side effect. In Shiya, where time spells were almost non-existent, only the side effects of 6 calamities could cause him to become like this. After figuring out the cause of the matter, Luo Ye came back to his senses and began to sense his condition in a panic. However, the result was completely unacceptable to him. Luo Ye's bloodline had basically fallen into a deep sleep. Whether it was the Gulan Daer or the Pei Tila, they could not be contacted at all. It was as if the curse power had disappeared. Luo Ye was basically in a state where it was almost non-existent. In other words, it was not just her appearance that had changed. Right now, Luo Ye's combat power was basically no different from an ordinary child. How could this be? Right, there's still the system, but in this unprecedented situation, Luo Ye truly panicked for the first time. After losing almost all of his power, the only thing that remained in the youth's body was the system. However, this did not affect the youth's battle prowess much. For so many years, Luo Ye basically did not rely on this French thing to fight, and now that he had no curse power and no money, what could he do even if he had the system? Realizing that his body had undergone a series of drastic changes, the black-haired youth fell into a state of confusion. He covered his forehead and tried to think, but the uneasiness in his heart grew bigger and bigger like a whirlpool. The sense of powerlessness and helplessness that he had never felt before made his body gradually begin to tremble. No, I have to calm down. It has already happened. Right, where am I now? Senior sister? Looking at the room that he had never seen before, Luo Ye was at a loss for a moment, but before he could jump out of bed to look for clues, the door of the bathroom suddenly opened. The moment he heard the wooden door open, the black-haired youth's body trembled in panic. He could not help but look to the side, but in the next moment, his eyes widened. In the room, the person who appeared opposite the fairy-like youth was a young girl who had just come out of the shower. Her body was still covered in dreamy water vapor. She was the senior sister that Luo Ye had been searching for, but right now, she was quite different from how she usually was. Her skin was white and slightly warm, with light pink skin. Her hair was slightly moist, which contrasted sharply with her skin tone. Her exquisite face was impeccable, and her slender body showed off her perfect proportions. The cold elegance and nobility that originally belonged to royalty seemed to have been diluted in this private environment, turning into a temptation that attracted people to get close to her. A white bath towel covered Lillian's luxurious body from her chest to the middle of her thighs, but it also outlined the outline of her body to the greatest extent. She had a bulging chest, a slender waist, and a flat lower abdomen. Below her flat lower abdomen was a pair of white and slender legs that could not be seen due to her Austin Empire long dress. Senior sister's body is so beautiful. The moment he saw Lillian, Luo Ye almost reflexively froze as if he had seen a stunning piece of art. On the other side, the black-haired girl's eyes widened when she saw the youth, but she suddenly regained her senses after a while. Luo Ye! After calling out to him, Lillian almost instantly wanted to pounce in front of him. But just as she moved, she suddenly noticed that apart from shock, there was also a hint of fear in the youth's golden eyes. He even couldn't help but take a few steps back. Lillian was stunned for a moment, but then she immediately understood the situation. Chapter 330. In the early morning, the black-haired girl walked up to the young man's bed. In front of her, Luo Ye's face was already flushed red. Currently, Luo Ye was feeling very conflicted. On one hand, his instinctive fear was urging him to stay away from Lillian. On the other hand, the girl's body, which seemed to be the embodiment of the word beauty itself, was right in front of him. Her beauty was mixed with fear, giving birth to a unique demonic feeling that kept provoking his nerves. Scary, but so beautiful. He wanted to get closer to her. Such a temptation was born in his heart. As Lillian got closer, this conflicted feeling became more and more intense, causing the young man to be unable to advance or retreat. In order to get closer to Luo Ye, she lowered her body and climbed onto the bed. The towel wrapped around Lillian's body naturally loosened due to her movements. Her delicate collarbone with water droplets and her smooth, white shoulders gradually got closer. What followed was a wave of hot air from the bathroom. As if she felt that the hair in front of her was blocking her vision, the girl gently tucked her long hair behind her ears, revealing her beautiful face and snow-white neck. In that instant, the girl's unique temperament, which was a mixture of innocence and maturity, caused Luo Ye to widen his eyes and feel a rush of excitement. Luo Ye, it's me. Do you still recognize me? Lillian's red lips parted slightly as she spoke, causing the black-haired young man's body to tremble slightly. Senior sister? Yes, it's big sister. Don't be afraid. I know your current situation. It's due to the level suppression, right? I think so. I haven't experienced it before, so, it's all right. I understand. As Lillian said that, She crawled forward a few more steps. She stared at the young man's flushed face, slowly got closer, and then lightly kissed his smooth face. And a spee. The instant the kiss landed on the young man's face, Luo Ya's body trembled violently. However, he resisted the urge to run away. He lowered his gaze and couldn't help but ask Lillian. "As senior sister, what are you doing?" "A morning kiss. It's a very common etiquette, right?" "I see." Chapter 331. In the bathroom, the slightly cold water splashed on the floor, and the sound of water dripping continued. It was early summer, and although the weather was warm, it wasn't completely hot yet. Most people still thought that it was too early to take a cold shower. However, at this time, in the bathroom, the young man's figure was bathed in water, and his cheeks were still as red as blood. The weather might not be hot, but the high temperature in the room and on the bed wasn't in the scope of the weather. In the face of the arson of the two, even the heavens were powerless against it. They could only lower the temperature physically. Unfortunately, cold water couldn't wash away the memories, let alone cool down the scorching heat in his heart. When the two hugged earlier, due to Luo Ya's struggle, the towel wrapped around Lillian's body loosened. Although the girl panicked and grabbed the end of the white towel in front of her body, the result was even more impactful in Luo Ya's eyes. It was an experience where he felt like he saw something, but also like he didn't see it. Only the center part of the body was barely covered by the thin wet towel, and there was nothing under the towel. Under this indescribable but unusual temptation, the inexperienced young man and woman immediately blushed. Lillian panicked and adjusted the position of the towel back and forth to cover more of her body, but the result was that more and more of her body was exposed. Witnessing such a scene, Luo Ya didn't dare to stay any longer. He could only grab his clothes and run into the bathroom. "Luo Ya, I'm going to take a shower." Leaving such words, the red-faced young man hurriedly fled to the bathroom. Before entering the bathroom, the young man looked back and saw the beautiful back of the girl covered by her black hair. The perfect proportion of her curves under the morning light once again dealt a critical blow to him. Senior sister's body is really beautiful. Soaking in the warm water, Luo Ya, who thought so, couldn't help but rub his cheeks. Should I say that she's indeed a member of the royal family? Just like the Akit family, which had a 1,000-year-old heritage, under the improvement of generations of handsome men and beautiful women in the Akit family, who had a longer history, Lillian's noble appearance and temperament aside, her body was as fascinating as a work of art. There were no flaws at all. If Luo Ya was afraid of becoming like this before, then what flashed through his mind just now was joy. If Luo Ya was still in her original body with full functions and hormones, she definitely wouldn't be able to endure Lillian's intimacy and the agitation of her bloodline. She would probably write a letter and burn paper in one go to report the completion of the mission to Patriarch Luo Yi. But even if there were no major physical problems, it was inevitable that there would be psychological problems after experiencing such temptation. Luo Ya didn't know if it was just his imagination, but he felt that Lillian's attitude towards him had changed slightly. It was a feeling that something was added to their past relationship. Although she didn't know what it was, Luo Ya's immediate feeling was that the warmth of the past had turned into an occasional blush and heartbeat. Is it because my body became like this? Chapter 332. Early in the morning at St. Freya Academy, Infant Tea House, famous for its high-quality desserts, two girls sat opposite each other at the tea table. One had long blonde hair, while the other had fiery red hair. Nua Iyer, Heidi Crete, and Xiaolot, Sorophia. The two girls in the academy, Golden Rose and Red Rose, were elegantly drinking their morning tea. Even though they were gathered together early in the morning, they weren't very close to each other. After all, this was a private meeting. If it was an official meeting, the two would stick to their duties and communicate peacefully. But now, it was a place to express their personal feelings. After quarreling over Luo Ya's time allocation for a month, the two naturally didn't treat each other well. On the other hand, the reason why the two girls gathered together today wasn't to improve their relationship, but because a common piece of news was passed to them this morning, and they paid extra attention to it. Luo Ya and that woman went after the cultists. You know about this, right? Of course, I know everything about my dear. How could I miss out on this news? What do you think? It's not a threat. In the face of Nuo Ayer's question, Xia Luo replied with an ambiguous answer. The blonde girl was silent for a moment, then nodded slightly in agreement. As Luo Ye's protector and temporary fiancé, both Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo were very wary of the boy's arrival at the academy. After all, this place was different from the family. There were too many opportunities and too many people with intentions. Since ancient times, how many betrothed people had their halberds buried in the sand in this academy? How many childhood sweethearts were unable to walk hand in hand after coming here? To some extent, St. Freya Academy was a lover's nightmare, a paradise for vixens. 1 second to remember. It had been nearly 2 months since school started. Although Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo were at war from time to time, they were on the same side. Up until now, there were already 3 vixens, but even so, they didn't dare to be careless when dealing with a woman. Lillian Ackman was a terrifying opponent whose status and appearance were not inferior to the two of them. In fact, she was even stronger. She was also the person that the two of them did not want to face the most. Due to the strange queen preference of the Akat family, the vigilant Nuo Ayer and Xia Luo paid special attention to Lillian when they came to the academy. However, with the direct confrontation between the two in public and the appointment of Paul Ackman as the deputy minister, their worries gradually disappeared. The only reason why the two of them were discussing was that Luo Ye and Austin's princess hadn't returned in one night. Normally speaking, one night should be enough to chase after him. He must have encountered some kind of trouble. Then it's even less likely that there's a problem. Moreover, that woman isn't interested in men. That's true. Chapter 333. In the warm bathroom, Luo Ye was washing his hair diligently with his small hands. He dripped some wet cleaning liquid into his hands, then rubbed it with bubbles and covered his hair. This was originally a simple process, but when his hair suddenly increased, the difficulties suddenly increased. It's so long, so troublesome. The young man thought as he rubbed bubbles on his hair inch by inch. He sighed softly. It had to be said that the side effect of time erosion breath was not only the shrinkage of age, but there were also many other problems. For example, Luo Ye's long hair, which he had never dealt with before, fluttered back and forth, giving the young man an otherworldly aura. However, it was heavy and difficult to wash. It was also easily pressed down when he was lying down. It was much more troublesome than short hair. After much effort, Luo Ye finally finished this difficult first battle. However, when the young man finished wringing his hair, he suddenly remembered an important problem. He did not have a towel. I forgot. Speaking of which, this seems to be a temporary house. Luo Ye looked around and scratched his head. He could only walk up to the door and knock. After getting Lillian's attention, the young man carefully opened the door a crack. His face was slightly red as he made his request. Senior apprentice sister, do you still have a towel? Sorry, I forgot to give it to you. Use this instead. When Lillian heard Luo Ye's request, she was slightly stunned. Then, she turned around and handed the towel to the door. The young man took it and immediately closed the door. He could not help but heave a sigh of relief. No matter what, the two of them were not real relatives. Although Luo Ye would not find it awkward to hand over a towel at the bathroom door, it was inevitable that he would feel shy. Fortunately, although he had shrunk, Lillian still respected his wishes. She even turned her head away. Well, I guess senior apprentice sister won't bully me when I'm weak. The naive young man hummed a song as he wiped his body. He was unaware of the intense psychological struggle Lillian had gone through last night. After wiping away all the water droplets, the young man looked at his clothes that were stained with blood and mud. After some thought, he sighed. Not only was it dirty, it was also a size too big. He could not wear it at all. The young man blinked helplessly. He could only learn from Lillian and wrap his body with a towel. However, as he moved, a fragrance drifted into Luo Ye's nose. The young man could not help but be slightly stunned. What a familiar smell. I feel like I've smelled it before. Where did it come from? Chapter 334. Luo Ye, how is it now? It's still too loose. In the fitting room, the black-haired young man held his small head with one hand as if he was having a headache. His other hand was holding a pair of pants that were much too big for him. His face was filled with worry and helplessness. After Lillian found the maid's clothes, Luo Ye, whose clothes had been through many trials and tribulations, naturally started rummaging through the cabinets. Then, of course, he found several servants' clothes. But unfortunately, unlike Lillian's cute and fitting clothes, normal adult male clothes were far too big for Luo Ye's current body. "Senior sister, do you have any smaller ones?" "Unfortunately, that's already the smallest one. It seems that I'll have to cut it a little." The black-haired girl looked at the young man who walked out of the fitting room. She smiled as she took the clothes that Luo Ye handed to her. Then, she released some spell power from her fingers to cut off the overly long parts. "Just bear with it for now. You'll be able to buy suitable clothes when you reach the next city." "Yep, that's nothing." The young man who was sitting on the chair and watching Lillian do her homework swung his legs. He stared at the girl's serious face. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but ask the question that had been bothering him ever since he learned of Lillian's plan. "Senior sister, are we really leaving?" It was a short question with a weak voice. But the girl stopped what she was doing when she heard Luo Ye's question. Lillian looked at the clothes in her hands for a moment, then nodded resolutely. "Yep, we have to leave." "I see." Luo Ye didn't refute the girl's resolute words. But he lowered his head slightly with a hint of disappointment. Having just experienced the danger of a fragment of history, he naturally wanted to see the people close to him as soon as possible. It was only natural that he wouldn't be happy about having to be separated all of a sudden. Lillian understood this. But understanding was one thing. The girl didn't feel anything. After all, the people she cared about the most were right in front of her. Lillian glanced at the young man who was kicking his feet worriedly. She hesitated for a moment and sighed. She slowly retracted the spell power in her hands. The girl walked up to Luo Ye and gently lifted his chin. Their eyes met as she tried to persuade him. Chapter 335. The Austin Empire was a country where conservatism prevailed, whether it was the citizens or the nobles, whether it was in their ideology or in their daily lives. The ancient glory of the Austin Empire that no longer existed was something that the citizens of the Austin Empire yearned for, which was why they viewed the ancients as beautiful in all sorts of ideologies. One of the most representative examples was the extravagant ball gowns worn by the noblewomen of the Austin Empire. Even though the simplified dance steps could no longer allow them to dance in full bloom, these gowns still occupied the high ground of mainstream formal wear for hundreds of years. As for men and women, that was even more so. Luo Ye, who was well versed in history and folklore, clearly remembered what it meant to share a bed with someone of the opposite sex in the Austin Empire. That was basically a secret promise, and it meant that she would not marry anyone other than him. "Last night, we slept together." The girl's words entered his ears, and her hot breath that made him itch hit his ears. Looking at the beautiful face that was so close to him, Luo Ye almost instantly covered his ears, and his face flushed red. "Together? Was it because of my situation at the time?" Such a question appeared in the young man's mind, and after his ears, Luo Ye's heart also began to itch uncontrollably due to certain feelings. It was a feeling that the young man was desperately suppressing in the depths of his heart, mixed with excitement and anticipation. It was because the relationship between the two of them was so contradictory, but it was also abnormally tempting. Just thinking about it made his heart beat faster, and his brain heat up. Even his breathing became unstable, but the question in his heart was getting harder and harder to ignore. "Does senior sister want to have that kind of relationship with me?" Reaching out his hand to touch his chest that was hiding something burning, the young man blinked his moist eyes, and could not help but look up at the black-haired girl. "As senior sister, was it because my situation last night was very bad?" "That's indeed the reason." Facing Luo Ye's question, Lillian slightly averted her gaze, and reached out to pull up the hair by her ear, and her blushing cheeks and neck were especially charming. Chapter 336. Under the light of the rising sun, different people were living different lives. For example, some were drinking tea, some were whispering sweet nothings, and some were hurrying on their way. The golden sunlight swept away the silver moon. In the forest under the morning sun, a team of mercenaries under the lead of a silver-haired girl riding a monster rushed out of the mountains in the north of Akkad territory and ran to the territory of Saint Maester theocracy. Looking at the disappearing moonlight in the sky, AI Lizzie, who felt a part of her power falling into a deep slumber, sighed slightly and looked back at Cynthia and the others. No one is left behind, right? Yes, Mississippi, the woman in armor lowered her head slightly and answered. But before she could finish her sentence, a vomiting sound came from behind. AI Lizzie heard the sound and looked back. Behind Cynthia, a middle-aged man patted the back of an old man in a gray robe and smiled helplessly. I'm sorry, Mississippi. This old man is old. He can't stand the bumpy ride. Don't listen to him. I'm fine, Mississippi. I just ate too much for dinner. Really? The old village chief of the Church of Strength, Wood, waved his hand with a calm face. Rodney, who was beside him, didn't say anything. AI Lizzie looked at the old man and then looked at the pagan soldiers who were in a bad mood from the bumpy ride of the monsters. After thinking for a moment, she sighed and gave another order. Forget it. Let's take a rest, AI Lizzie said as she jumped off the back of the wolf-shaped monster. She stroked the head of the monster and injected some life force into it. The tall monster wolf immediately let out a comfortable howl and wagged its tail like a husky. Such a magical scene made Cynthia and the others who recently learned about the girl's ability couldn't help but admire her. That's right. These monsters that were terrifying to outsiders were the wolves that other territories had to invest a lot of manpower to eliminate every year. Under the command of Miss AI Lizzie of Akkad territory, they had become a special means of movement in the territory. Once there was an emergency, the soldiers could ride these monsters under the leadership of AI Lizzie and could even shorten the distance by 10 times. For example, now, after crossing 3 mountains in one night, AI Lizzie and the others had reached the border of the theocracy, which would normally take 10 days to reach. If it was during wartime, this speed would be considered divine soldiers descending from the sky. But now, the girl who accomplished this feat didn't have any joy. Instead, she took out the life orb and carefully observed it. As expected, it's still like this. After a night of traveling and thinking, AI Lizzie had calmed down a little. After noticing that the life orb's radiance didn't change, the girl already had some guesses in her heart. The place Luoya went to wasn't some hellish battlefield, but a peaceful academy. As a great noble of the theocracy, he must be one of the important figures in the academy. Considering the strength of the young man, the possibility of Luoya dying in a battle in such a place was very small. Then, there was only one possibility: the historical fragment, which was the danger brought by Luoya's bloodline. Now that the life orb was stable, it was very likely that it didn't mean that Luoya was dying. Instead, it was the same situation as the previous few times. Chapter 337. What were the sacred grounds of Shiya's love? Every country had their own answers to this question. For example, in the Austin Empire, most of the nobles in the south would choose the Rumen Forest. The legend of Charles II luminous butterflies had been widely spread in the Austin Empire for hundreds of years. Every February, the Milton family would hold a grand aristocratic banquet there. In the north, the people near the capital were more inclined to go to the northern territory of the Austin Empire, the Abwell Duchy. Abwell was one of the earliest vassal states of the Austin Empire. It was located in the frozen lands of the north, and its land area was not small. It bordered the kingdom of Knights of Pender, but its location was very remote. It was an awkward place where agriculture and animal husbandry were not easy to develop. It was so useless that the Austin Empire did not annex it. However, after many years of moving to the west, the living standards of the people improved, and a side business of Abwell rose. As a country in the north, Abwell had a specialty, and that was the aurora that appeared every summer. It was a tourist attraction, and it was a natural sight that most Shiya's people in the big cities liked. In ancient times, the aurora was considered to be Shiya's appreciation and recognition. It appeared in many legends and stories, and was generally regarded as a beautiful and blessed light. In the Austen Empire, a special group of people gave it a special meaning. It was said that couples who watched the aurora together would be recognized and blessed by Shia. Yes, it was such a rumor. However, as the saying went, when a lie is told too many times, it will become the truth. This saying had been circulating in the north of the Austen Empire for hundreds of years, and now it had a little bit of an ancient flavor. More and more people believed in this saying, and Abwell in the north became more and more prosperous. Today, the country had become the honeymoon territory of the rich merchants and nobles of the Austen Empire and the kingdom of Knights of Pender. After the snow closed the mountains for half a year, countless newlyweds and unmarried couples would welcome in May. There was an endless stream of luxury cars on the official road, and there were also many stories of famous historical figures. For example, when the Austen Empire's Emperor Gumund II visited Aberville, he originally wanted to use the name of a visit to inspect and prepare to expand and conquer this land into the empire's territory. But when he was watching the aurora, he accidentally met Princess Aberville. The two fell in love at first sight and soon fell in love. Because of this, Gumund II believed that Aberville was the blessed land of Shia, and the invasion war was thus aborted. In the end, Princess Aberville married into the Austen Empire, and the combination of the two sides avoided a calamity. Such stories were quite popular among the people and were even published in books. However, in the eyes of Luo Ye, these stories were not credible at all. At the end of the day, the fate of a small country like Abwell was not in its own hands. The biggest reason it could survive beside the Austen Empire until now was because it was the buffer zone between the north of the Austen Empire and the Knights' country of Pender. As for love at first sight? If the Austen Empire wanted to marry him, wouldn't the Aberville princess marry him? Would she dare to? If it were in the past, Luo Ye would have been sarcastic towards the Austen Empire's propaganda, but ever since he met Lillian, senior sister said that? Then it's fine. Looking at Lillian's longing expression when she told the love story, Luo Ye almost subconsciously gave up on refuting. As for the place that senior sister chose, Luo Ye also felt that it was more suitable. The journey wasn't too far, and as a city that focused on developing tourism, Aberville did indeed have enough human traffic. The endless stream of tourists would allow the two of them to fish in troubled waters, and the possible encirclement caused by prophecy spells would be broken. Chapter 338. In Luo Ye's previous life, an admirable army once had a saying. No guns, no cannons, the enemy will make them for us. Luo Ye was deeply moved by the fearless and optimistic slogan in his previous life. Now, Luo Ye also absorbed the essence of it, but it was a different situation. No cars, no horses, the system will make them for us. Sitting on a log for a temporary rest, Luo Ye looked at the patrolling Lionheart soldiers and set such a goal in his heart. To be honest, as a host, Luo Ye felt that he could be considered gentle and calm. Ever since he was young, he had never complained about the French-Italian hybrid system that did nothing most of the time and only worked in times of crisis. However, this time was different. This time, you didn't even detect the side effects. What use do I have for you? In front of an empty bonfire, Luo Ye roared at the system. As if sensing the unprecedented anger of the host, the system actually went silent for a moment before replying. This system is a passive system. When special factors such as time and space are encountered, there will be a delay in the data analysis function. Hope the host can understand. Understand? Understand your head. If I forgive you, how can I extort you? Luo Ye made up his mind to take advantage of the system. The anger on his face naturally increased. At this moment, he spoke righteously, like a player who encountered an exploding server or an auntie who haggled in the market downstairs. He stared at the system looking for profit. Then, you want me to lose my memory? Sure, but you have to be sincere, right? The black-haired young man curled up the corner of his mouth. Staring at the 50% off on the 400 Years of History Limited event, he calmly stated his request. It's too expensive. I can't accept this discount. Either give me a discount or give me compensation. You choose. In the face of Roha's aggressive request, The system once again fell into silence and gave a reply after a long time. Everything has a source. Favorability cannot be generated out of thin air. The gold coins absorbed have been allocated to the existing underground mine. The system is unable to compensate. But considering the unusual situation that the host has experienced, the system will start a new event. Chapter 339. 3 days later, in St. Freya Academy, under the lush green tree, 2 young ladies were holding 2 letters that were clearly written by the same person. Their faces were pale, and their bodies were trembling. Dear Nua Iyer, we sincerely respect you and uphold the principle of peaceful coexistence to inform you that Mr. Luoya Akat has decided to marry the Austin Empire's queen, Lillian Ackman. The latter is pregnant. On the other side of the tea table, the blonde young lady read the anonymous letter that was sent to her this morning in an ice-cold tone. Her voice was trembling, especially when she read the words pregnant. The strong spell fluctuations shrouded Nua Iyer in a layer of light. Without a doubt, this letter written by an unknown person with the intention of persuading Nua Iyer to give up on their relationship with Luoya had completely infuriated Miss Angel. But one had to admit that even though the young lady's behavior was out of anger, there was also some worry and fear in it. Even though Nua Iyer felt that it was a lie, the entire letter was conclusive. Luoya and Lillian hadn't returned for 3 days, and everything seemed to be in line with the situation described in the letter. After comparing it with reality, Miss Angel finally couldn't hide her wavering heart. In the past 3 days, Nua Iyer and Xia Luo naturally sensed that something was amiss. But according to their mentor, Chris, she had received a handwritten letter from Lillian. Their mission to hunt down the cultists was a success and they weren't back yet. They were just on the way to complete another off-campus mission. Miss Angel was naturally suspicious of this statement, but she didn't have any clues until this letter appeared before them. Then they realized that something might have happened. Luoya and Lillian eloped? Nua Iyer wouldn't believe it no matter what. The reason was simple. As the childhood sweetheart who grew up with Luoya, Iyer knew him too well. He definitely wasn't the kind of person who would abandon everything for personal love. Another more important reason that Nua Iyer didn't want to admit was that Ai Lizzie was still in the Akat family. As a late-stage Siscon, would he abandon his beloved sister for a woman whom he had only known for less than 2 months? How was that possible? If that was the case, Nua Iyer would have won over the years. Moreover, Luoya was the only son in the family and he had a close relationship with his father on the front line. If Lillian was pregnant, the Akat family, who had few members, would support them no matter what. Why would they elope? Do you think that I'll be swayed by such rumors? You underestimate me too much, Lillian Archimedes. We have to act now. Xiaolot, I need your... Xiaolot? Nua Iyer stood up and looked at the young lady opposite her. She wanted to suggest to help, but she didn't expect the red-haired young lady to be stunned. Xia Luo's face was as pale as paper and her body was trembling slightly. However, unlike Nua Iyer's anger, Xia Luo's trembling was due to fear, or perhaps a psychological shadow. It was a psychological shadow brought by the Sorofia family's source substance. Most female marriages were unfortunate. The loyalty, source substance of the Sorofia family allowed their females to be loyal to their partners. However, because of this, if they couldn't obtain the love of their loved ones, they would suffer double the pain. Her aunts had all kinds of tragic experiences that they couldn't tell outsiders. Ever since she was young, Xia Luo had a fear of forming a family. It was only after meeting Luoya that things changed. Among all the girls that Luoya met, Xia Luo seemed to be optimistic and passionate, but she was actually the most insecure when it came to love. This kind of letter that was similar to breaking off the relationship made Xia Luo think of many situations where the females in her family were abandoned. Although her rationality told her that Luoya wouldn't do this, she couldn't help but think of things in a bad direction. Xia Luo? Why are you still looking at this thing? It's obviously fake. Nua Iyer couldn't help but frown when she saw the young lady staring at the letter with red eyes. However, Xia Luo couldn't help but make a guess. Chapter 340. On the official road leading to Aberville, the country of the north, A simple and elegant black carriage was moving forward. Inside the carriage, a black-haired young man was rolling on the bed. At that moment, Luo Ya's brows were tightly knitted. His eyes were closed and it was obvious that he was in a dream. However, the young man's petite body kept moving around on the bed. His facial expression showed that he was in pain and he was making some muffled sounds. No matter how one looked at it, he didn't look like he was sleeping normally. Perhaps she heard the sounds in the room, or perhaps she sensed the young man's emotional instability through the bloodline connection. The black door suddenly opened. Lillian walked in from the living room and saw the young man's appearance. She immediately woke him up. Luoya? Are you all right? Senior sister? Did I have a nightmare again? Hearing the young lady's call, Luoya woke up from his sleep. He rubbed his forehead as if he had a headache. Then he waved his hand to Lillian's worried gaze. It's fine, senior sister. It's just a nightmare. Although it's just a nightmare, you've been having nightmares for a few days, right? Are you really all right? It's fine. I'm just a little tired. I'll be fine when we reach the city. I see. Facing Roha's words, the black-haired girl had nothing to say, but she was still worried. She leaned down and gently hugged Roha's body, patting his back to calm his emotions. Seeing this, Roha stretched out his hand and hugged her back, but when he buried his face in Lillian's arms, his eyes gradually became dignified. 1 second to remember. It had been more than half a month since Luoya and Lillian left Leinster. During this time, the two could be said to have traveled rapidly. Now, they had passed through 3 towns and were about to reach the capital of the Aberville Duchy, Aurora City, Ors. At the beginning of this journey, Luoya took advantage of the time when Lillian was hunting to exchange favorability points. When the young lady returned with the archer, she was shocked when she saw a carriage appear out of thin air. However, after learning that Luoya obtained it through some means, she didn't pursue the matter. There were all kinds of strange things in this world. For example, some humans who were naturally close to trees might receive a gift from a certain forest and receive guidance to obtain a lost treasure. Such situations were recorded in history. Lillian didn't know if it was the same for Luoya, but she wouldn't suspect it either. No matter how good their relationship was, they couldn't have no secrets at all. Leaving some personal space for others was a form of etiquette and a form of respect. In the face of Lillian's behavior, Luoya heaved a huge sigh of relief and told her about the dangers of this journey and the situation of the Saint Heroes Society. Lillian recalled the history fragments where she had seen the organization with her own eyes. She nodded with a serious expression and discussed countermeasures with Luoya. In the end, they still decided to act according to the original plan. As a tourist destination, the northern region didn't have a fixed population. Cults couldn't develop there and there were almost no local forces. Besides, the flow of people there was difficult to target. Therefore, even in the face of cults, the closer northern region was still the best choice. Therefore, after having a meal of wild game, Luoya summoned the horses contributed by the cavalrymen to pull the sinful spirit carriage, and personally put on the illusory tear earring for Lillian. They embarked on the journey again. But this time, it was much more comfortable. Chapter 341. Aurora City, Thor. This was a city with a sweet smell floating in the air. Outside the tall and beautiful city gates, couples from the Austin Empire, the Kingdom of Knights, Pender, and the Kingdom of Scholars were entering the city in an orderly manner. Men and women supported each other on the shafts of the carriages as they looked at the scenery in the distance. Lovers who came out for a breath of fresh air were teasing each other. The nobles of the Austin Empire still had some restraint. Couples who came from the more liberal Pender and Bologna had already begun to hug each other. A strong smell of hormones floated in the air. A gust of wind blew, as if pink air was blowing from the city. However, it was precisely in such an atmosphere that within the long line of carriages, there were 2 travel-worn groups that clearly came from afar. Yet they stood out from the rest and seemed to be exceptionally conspicuous. If the space where the others were was pink, then these 2 teams were gloomy and dark. One could even vaguely feel waves of resentment. In the team wearing brown robes, a reddish-brown-haired girl was gnashing her teeth as she pinched the reins in her hand. The maid beside her sighed helplessly. On the other side, in the team wearing white robes, a blonde girl was also staring ahead with a gloomy expression. It had been half a month since Nua Iyer and Xia Luot received the provocative letter. In this half a month, Her Royal Highness and Miss Rose could be said to have rushed to this blessed city with all the forces they could mobilize in a short period of time. Xia Luot brought along her maid Go Lacey, while Nua Iyer brought along Bishop Philip, who had once live-streamed her kiss with Luo Ya to Ai Lizzie. In addition, there were a large number of elites from both sides. In total, there were more than 100 people. Compared to Luo Ya's journey, it was a vast and mighty force. As for why so many people had arrived earlier than Luo Ya, it was because Nua Iyer and Xia Luot had only rested once every 2 nights and spent the rest of the time on the road. That was how they managed to catch up and even overtake them. The reason why they were so anxious was that they wanted to snatch back Luo Ya as soon as possible. Another reason was that there were only 2 days left until the Abbeville Duchy's famous blessing ceremony. The blessing ceremony was also known as the Aurora Ceremony or the Spring Ceremony. It was similar to the Spring Festival in Luo Ya's previous life. It was the busiest time of the year in the entire northern region. One of the reasons for the birth of this festival was that the land would welcome the warm spring that would last for about half a year, and the flowers would bloom. The other reason was that the aurora would appear that night. Normally, the aurora was a celestial phenomenon. It was normal for it to appear this year but not the next. However, it seemed that due to the high concentration of magic in the sky, the aurora would appear at this time of the year. Strictly speaking, the festival was established after the aurora appeared. Therefore, the spring ceremony in the northern region was also known as the blessing ceremony or the aurora ceremony. Of course, this was only for the locals. To outsiders it was Valentine's Day. Today could be said to be the last day to participate in this festival. Tomorrow night, the grand New Year's Eve ceremony would begin. The carnival and festival would last for the entire night. The nobles from all over the country would gather at the Blessing Square to watch the aurora and receive Shiya's blessings. That's right. According to legend, the children born after watching the aurora would be born with Shiya's blessings. This was one of the main reasons why the northern region was known as the honeymoon place. In the entire northern region, if someone's name had the pronunciation of the aurora in the ancient Austin language, it was most likely that his or her parents had hit the bullseye here. Although the idea of giving blessings to the next generation after making a baby that night was strange to many people, it was a pity that men and women who fell in love were blind and did not hesitate to give it a try. Charlot's face was flushed red as she looked at the street vendors selling all kinds of pregnancy-enhancing potions. The red-haired young mistress turned to look at the princess beside her and couldn't help but complain softly. Chapter 342. On the 3rd floor of the Santa Fe Hotel's residential area, Luo Ya was in a luxurious room that resembled the presidential suite in his previous life. The black-haired young man walked to the window and sighed in relief as he looked at the lively crowd outside. After going through all kinds of difficulties, Luo Ya finally entered the largest city in the northern region under Lillian's lead. At least for the next few weeks, the two of them didn't need to live in a carriage far away from the crowd. It would be a lie to say that Luo Ya, who had finally regained his freedom after sitting in a carriage for more than half a month, wasn't happy about this situation. After all, the snow in the northern region had just melted, and both sides of the official road could be said to be barren. There weren't even any fresh flowers or green grass. In order to avoid attracting the attention of others, Luo Ya didn't get out of the carriage when they passed by the towns. Anyone would be exhausted after staying in such an environment for more than half a month. After opening the door to the balcony, the black-haired young man looked down at the surging crowd below him. At this moment, a traveling performance group playing musical instruments had just walked by, and the streets were filled with people applauding for them. In the buildings on both sides of the road, there were also many people who walked out of their rooms like Luo Ya to watch the fun. Amidst the cheerful music, there were people whistling and cheering. The festive atmosphere suddenly became dense. Amidst the sounds of drums, Luo Ya couldn't help but reveal a smile. He recalled the feeling of celebrating the new year in the holy city before he became the acting overlord and didn't need to socialize. As a noble with a territory, Luo Ye had to organize activities in his territory during the new year. Generally speaking, he wouldn't be able to experience the festive atmosphere in a big city. After all, the festivals in his territory were more busy for him. It had been a long time since the young man had experienced such a relaxed atmosphere that felt like a vacation. Therefore, he was quite excited and enjoyed it. Of course, there were more practical reasons why Luo Ye couldn't celebrate the new year. Just like many adults in his previous life, the Akit family spent too much money on celebrating the new year. Not to mention the banquets held during the new year, the decorations in the city, the rewards for the soldiers on duty, and the subsidies were a huge sum of money. If he really spent all of it, the budget for the second year would be wasted. As a developing territory that needed to save money for everything, Luo Ye couldn't even bear to celebrate the new year before he met a certain young lady. It was only after cooperating with the Sorofia family that things changed. For example, this year, Xia Luo wantonly distributed candy during the new year in Akit City in order to gain the support of the people of Akit territory. In this era, candy wasn't cheap. This kind of behavior was almost the same as scattering gold coins. However, as for the Sorofia family, money was probably the thing they had the most. Xia Luo didn't just scatter candy, she also spread the news that once the two of them got together, this kind of activity would happen every year. When Ai Lizzie heard the news, she was so angry that she almost fainted. Thinking about the interesting news of the young lady's mischief, Luo Ye's face showed a nostalgic smile. At this time, a gust of wind blew, blowing Luo Ye's black hair. The young man just felt cold and curled up his body. Suddenly, a coat appeared on his body, and then a warm body wrapped around him from behind. You're an ordinary person now, you should wear more clothes. Thank you, senior sister. Feeling the warmth of the body, the black-haired young man turned around and smiled gently at Lillian. That bright and warm smile under the sun made the black-haired girl's heart beat faster, and she couldn't help but hug him tighter. The two people hugging each other affectionately quickly attracted the attention of some people on the balcony of the opposite building. Whistles sounded one after another, with a different kind of ambiguous atmosphere. It also attracted the attention of the reddish-brown-haired young lady on the other side of the wall. It's so noisy, what's going on? But Xia Luo, who was talking to herself, walked to the balcony door, wanting to see what was going on. However, the moment the girl stepped out of the door, she saw the two people hugging next door and couldn't help but stop. These two people are... Chapter 343. The moment the door opened and Xia Luo appeared before the gap, the black-haired young lady's purple pupils contracted abruptly and her mind went blank. How is this possible? Why is she here? Have we been discovered? Such a thought flashed across Lillian's mind, followed by a strong sense of indignation. What a joke! We're already here. In a few more days, the strategy plan will be completed successfully, but now... Wait a minute. Lillian, who was at a loss due to Xia Luo's sudden appearance, many thoughts flashed through her mind in an instant. Just as she was about to release her curse power, she suddenly realized that something was amiss. Xia Luo's attention didn't seem to be on them. Lillian gazed at the brown-haired young lady who stared thoughtfully at the gold coin in her hand. In an instant, she figured out the current situation, but the crisis wasn't over yet. Senior. Luo Ye looked up at Lillian and realized that the young lady was looking at the door with a strange expression. He blinked and couldn't help but turn to the front. At the same time, Xia Luo, who was walking through the corridor, was also attracted by Luo Ye's voice. She put down the gold coin and looked over. Even though Luo Ye's body had shrunk and her appearance had become much gentler, her face wasn't at the stage where people familiar with her couldn't recognize her. And upon seeing Xia Luo all of a sudden, the unprepared young man would definitely reveal some clues. At the critical moment, Lillian's body reacted reflexively. She pressed the door open with her left hand, grabbed the startled young man with her right hand, and leaned over to kiss him forcefully. Clang. In the sound of the door closing, the nervous young lady grabbed Luo Ye's hands and pressed him behind the door. On the other side of the door, Xia Luot, who was in the corridor, also came to a halt. She stared at the door that suddenly closed and knitted her brows strangely. Why do I seem to have heard Luo Ya's voice just now? The brown-haired young lady recalled the movements from the room next door and became suspicious. She couldn't help but approach the door to listen carefully. But it was a pity that Luo Ya, who was physically gagged, was destined to be unable to give any response. Less than half a meter away, the nervous black-haired young lady tasted the dessert before her with all her might. The strange stimulation that felt like walking on the tip of a knife made her brain tremble. The rapid secretion of dopamine and a large number of hormones made her unable to suppress her excitement. Under this excitement, the young lady's thinking, observation, and reaction speed reached an unprecedented level. At this moment, time seemed to have stopped in Lillian's mind. The tremors on the ground allowed her to clearly sense Charlotte's approach from outside the door. It also made her understand that if this continued, the two of them would definitely be exposed. Chapter 344. On the second day of Luo Ya's arrival in the Abwell Duchy, the night fell and the entire northern region welcomed its grandest celebration after a year. On the streets, the citizens wore new clothes and carried out a grand parade under the lead of a parade band. From the streets to the end of the alleys, the noisy crowd stretched as far as the eye could see. Colorful floats drove past amid the cheers of the crowd. The cursed fireworks on both sides of the street rose into the sky before the sun had completely faded away, pushing the festive atmosphere to its climax in this lively evening. At the same time, the well-dressed men and women entered the banquet hosted by Duke Abwell. The aurora had been regarded as Shiya's blessing since ancient times. But just like how the relationships between people varied, the location to view the aurora was also particular. The ancients believed that the closer to the sky, the purer the blessing would be. This was very similar to the customs of the Highland tribes in Luo Ya's previous life. In the entire Aurora City, one of the highest places to view the aurora was the blessing square of Duke Abwell's Abwell mansion. But it was a pity that this square wasn't open to the public and only the guests of the Duke's mansion could use it. As for how to become a guest, apart from the powerful nobles of various countries, there was only one way for the rest of the people: to spend money. As long as one attended Duke Abwell's banquet, it didn't matter if they knew each other or not, they would be considered the guests of the Duke. However, the entry fee was clearly marked, which was an eye-opener for Luo Ya. To put it bluntly, this was actually similar to the entrance fee of the Blessing Square. It was not a proper banquet at all. After all, everyone was here for their honeymoon, and couples had no desire to socialize. The so-called banquet was basically two people strolling and eating together, and then flirting while waiting for polar light to appear. As for why they didn't directly sell the entrance fee and insisted on holding a banquet, one of the reasons was naturally that the name of the banquet could be sold at a higher price. Another main reason was that it could avoid the Vatican. The aurora was the legendary blessing of Shiya. According to the teachings of the Vatican, anything bestowed by Shiya could not be interfered with by others. That was to say, no matter nobles or civilians, they were all equal under Shiya's blessing. Therefore, if the blessing square was opened, it meant that anyone could enter at will and outsiders could not interfere. Selling tickets in the square under such circumstances was tantamount to selling Shiya's blessing as a commodity, which was undoubtedly a serious violation of the doctrine and a great disrespect to Shiya. Obviously, no one could bear such a huge crime. However, it was impossible to let people spend so much money to build the Blessing Square for free. Thus, 200 years ago, Duke Aberville had a flash of inspiration and came up with this idea, which was to take it for his own use. Private territory not being open to the public is reasonable and legal, right? I'm watching the aurora with my friend at home. It's not against the teachings, right? As for how many friends I have, it's none of your business. Don't ask. If you ask, it means that you love to make friends. If you come for the first time, you'll be a new friend, and if you come for the first time, you'll be an old friend. Because of this anecdote, Duke Aberville became a proverbial joke in the northern part of the Austin Empire. It was used to describe friends who were greedy for money or friends who had no real feelings for each other. Without a doubt, this was a very disreputable joke for the Duke's family. However, it had to be said that the nobles in the northern part of the Austin Empire were different from the nobles in other places. The harsh environment made them more pragmatic. Compared to the gold coins that could be used to buy supplies for the winter, they didn't care about the empty reputation. Furthermore, the Aberville family was not a complete miser. Looking at the exquisite desserts on the table and listening to the performance of a famous orchestra in the Austin Empire, the black-haired young man couldn't help but nod slightly. He felt that the money was well spent. As if noticing Luo Ya's gaze and actions, the black-haired girl's voice sounded at the right time. "Are you hungry?" Chapter 345. In the noisy hall, Nuair Heathcliff, who had become a staff member of the event, was wearing a white robe and a veil. He looked at the couples below without saying a word, but his eyes were darting around quickly. As the next generation leader of the Holy See, Noel was naturally in awe of Aurora, who was known as Shia's blessing. Unfortunately, she, who had become a blessing through the Holy See's arrangement, did not have the heart to bless the crowd. It was better to say that she only had one name in her heart, Luoya. As the saying goes, snakes have their own paths. In terms of finding people, Nuair was naturally inferior to Xia Lot, who was proficient in all kinds of metaphysical astrology. However, that didn't mean that she didn't have any advantages. Nuair's advantage was actually very simple. She had a lot of people and a lot of influence. In the entire Xia region, although the nobles had power and influence, most of them had their own areas of activity. For example, the Akot family naturally had a lot of say in the Church of Saint Maester, but outside the church, their influence was greatly reduced by the local nobles. As the saying goes, a strong dragon can't suppress a snake in its own territory. However, there was an exception to this situation. If there was anyone in this world who dared to say that they wouldn't be suppressed when they went out, and who dared to say that their influence reached every corner of the world, then there was only one answer, and that was the Heathcliff family. Because as the saying goes, Shia's light shines on everyone, and wherever there are people, there will be a church. The nobles of a place may be despised, but the church will always be the place where people gathered their faith. As for bullying the church? Well, wouldn't that mean they were tired of living? Therefore, although Nuair had never been to the northern region before, with the influence of the local church, she was able to mobilize a large number of people in a short period of time. Under the guise of giving blessings to the couples, she unknowingly searched the entire hall, carpet-checked all the men of suitable age, and looked for traces of the black-haired boy. Although this method was primitive, there was no doubt that it was effective. In fact, she did feel as if she had found something. It was an inexplicable feeling that flashed through her heart when she scanned the couples dancing and laughing in the hall. It could also be described as an intuition, and she had vaguely found the source of this feeling. On the dance floor. Just now, I felt like I saw something familiar. What is it? With this thought in mind, the blonde girl slowly approached the dancing crowd. On the other hand, Lillian Archman was instantly anxious. I'm going to be found. Such a thought emerged in her mind. Unlike Lot, Nuair was Luo Ya's childhood sweetheart. They had been together since the age of 9. Luo Ya's body. Except for the long hair Luo Ya, there was no difference. Nuair and Luoir. I can't let her see Roha's face. Chapter 346. Life Sphere was a curse vessel invented hundreds of years ago to search for the remains of the dead in the Mutants' War. Now, hundreds of years later, it had become the standard for wives who stayed at home for a long time. Its principle was simple, and its function was simple, but it was because of this that it was particularly effective. No matter how far the distance was, no matter how the owner's body changed, the life sphere would lead the two to meet again. Today, this function was best explained. Elder brother. Amidst the worried shouts, the silver-haired girl broke through the window and entered. The first thing she saw was something she couldn't believe. Not far in front of her, two people in the room were looking at her in shock. One of them was a woman that AI Lizzie didn't know at all, and the other was a child. A child with the appearance of Luoya. When AI Lizzie saw the child who looked like Luoya, her face turned pale as if she was struck by lightning. She could only think of one possibility. Elder brother had an affair with a wild woman and had a child. The moment she thought of this possibility, AI Lizzie's big eyes immediately turned red, and she felt like the sky was about to collapse. If it was Nua Iyer and Xia Luot, then it would be fine. Considering the family background and many other factors, AI Lizzie was actually prepared that Luo Ye couldn't refuse them in the deepest part of her heart. But no matter what, he couldn't be with a wild woman, and even have a child? I didn't do that kind of thing with elder brother, what a joke. You guys are, AI Lizzie? In front of the girl who pointed at the two tremblingly, Luo Ye finally recovered from the sudden change and called out the girl's name. Hearing Luo Ye's voice, AI Lizzie was also taken aback, then she blinked and calmed down a little. Wait, it doesn't seem right. If it's elder brother's child, then it's a little too old. This age seems to be about the same as when I first met elder brother. If we cut back, it's almost 7 or 8 years old. Even in a region where the body's development speed is much faster due to magic essence, it's theoretically impossible. Of course, it can't be ruled out that some families have special talents or some specialties in source substances, but the Akot family is obviously not in this list. Chapter 347. In the rain of exploding gravel, Luo Ye, whose body glowed, experienced the most helpless moment since he awakened extraordinary power at the age of 9. Without the curse attribute, the gravel could only pose a threat to ordinary people. Soldiers of source rank 6 could avoid being injured by brandishing their weapons. Soldiers of source rank 5 could release their curse to send the gravel flying. Soldiers of source rank 4 and above were even worse. But now Luo Ye had no curse power. He only had the protection of the curse vessel given by the two girls, so he could only hold his head and squat in the gravel. Yes, at the moment of the battle, Lillian stuffed a bracelet into Luo Ye's arms, and AI Lizzie also threw out a pendant. The two curse vessels were activated at the same time under the intense curse power environment. The protective light directly wrapped Luo Ye like a rice dumpling. Then, there was no then because both sides had no time to care about Luo Ye. Under the moonlight, dozens of silver-white birds flew from the silver moon, hovering in the sky and falling. Each of them had a curse power fluctuation that made Lillian vigilant. Under the moonlight, AI Lizzie, who was almost immobilized by the huge curse power, also regained her mobility. Son of Tsangin, this bloodline was the top bloodline of silver rank. There were almost no side effects. While it brought infinite vitality to the holder, it also brought a lot of room for free development. AI Lizzie was a typical example. Every bird here was a life storage that the girl had accumulated her curse power and vitality to produce a qualitative change. Therefore, although Elisa looked like she was only at source rank 4, the curse techniques she used could actually reach source rank 3. Blowing up the roof seemed to be an unplanned act of impulse, but in fact, it was the silver-haired young lady who was in the middle of the battle. After this wave of reinforcement, the flames of war were finally ignited uncontrollably. Luo Ye and I are destined to be together. This is the fate brought by the bloodline. Our combination will continue the bloodline that countless ancestors have preserved with great difficulty in a better form. This is our responsibility and obligation. Bloodline? Are you talking about the bloodline that made Big Brother go through so much danger and pain? You can continue that kind of thing by yourself. Improve the Akot family's bloodline and use my perfect. The next generation will definitely be happier. It seems that the contradiction can't be reconciled. The final communication came to an end in the fierce collision of thoughts between the two, followed by an explosive torrent of curse power. AI Lizzie unleashed her full strength in the face of an opponent of a higher level. The silver-white bird turned into source rank 3 flame curse and rushed at the black-haired girl. On the other hand, several soldiers with golden light shields appeared in front of Lillian. The sun shield of the Sun Flame Army was an immunity shield made by gathering the top fire attribute curse vessels. It had excellent resistance to flames. Under the protection of this shield, Lillian didn't move. The flame tornado was like a breeze in her eyes, and it also blocked most of the impact for Luo Ye behind her. The intense confrontation between the third level of the source grade was unfolding on the tall bell tower. Such a huge commotion naturally attracted the attention of the people in the Blessing Plaza. Faced with such a sudden outbreak of chaotic fighting, some of the couples in the festival began to disperse, but more people were watching the show. In the chaotic crowd, Go Lacey led Rose's elites and quickly approached Xia Luot, who was standing with the upper nobles of various countries. "Miss, that's..." Chapter 348. At the edge of the palace under the moonlight, the blonde girl looked at the boy in front of her with a forced smile. On the other side, Xia Luot lowered her head as if she thought of something. She walked slowly from behind Nu'a with a heavy expression. In front of the two, the black-haired boy's eyes widened and trembled slightly. After a moment, he forced a smile and asked, "Nu'a, what are you talking about? Our relationship is... We've been lovers since we were 9 years old. Although we've never said it out loud, you know about it, right?" Looking at Nu'a, Luoya widened her eyes and her lips trembled slightly. The blonde girl sighed and whispered, "Since we were young, you've always known about it, but you've always avoided it. Because of our identities, I didn't blame you and even endured a lot of things for this relationship. But this time, it's beyond my tolerance limit," Nu'a said with disappointment in her eyes. The reddish-haired girl turned her head silently with a sad expression on her face. Without a doubt, whether it was Nu'a or Xia Luot, they were both 1 in a million geniuses. They had a high status in their respective countries and countless pursuers. They weren't weak and cowardly girls who relied on men. On the contrary, they had their own strong self-esteem. Because the relationship with Luoya wasn't easy and their love was too deep, both of them suppressed themselves to a certain extent for Luoya and even acquiesced to each other's existence. But this time, the situation was different. Remember? After pondering for a moment, the blonde girl clenched her hands and looked at the boy in front of her. "Now, your body must have suffered some side effects. You don't have much resistance, but it's different from Xia Luot. This time, you took the initiative to leave us, right?" The moment he heard Nu'a's words, the black-haired boy's body trembled. Upon seeing his reaction, Xia Luot's eyes teared up sadly. Although Xia Luot didn't meet Luoya directly and didn't know the boy's reaction, Xia Luot witnessed the boy and Lillian hugging on the balcony. No matter how she looked at it, it didn't seem like he was forced. So if he wasn't forced or deceived, what was this behavior? It was no different from the elopement written in the letter. Chapter 349. It's the aurora. The moment the pink aurora appeared in the night sky, cheers sounded from all directions in the city. In front of the empty palace, the 3 people who were hugging each other widened their eyes in shock. Pink aurora. This is a rare color in the history of Abbeville. Among the 7 colors of aurora, cyan, blue, yellow, green, purple, red, and pink, legend has it that it represents love the most. Following the appearance of this blessed aurora in the night sky, fireworks also rose in the city, embellishing the aurora and drawing a picture of the sky. Under this beautiful scenery, the 2 girls became emotional. But what they didn't know was that this beautiful aurora would create unexpected results in strange ways. It's actually pink. The last time I heard it was decades ago. The blessing of the pink aurora is a good sign. Hee, it's really suitable for us lovers. It's so beautiful. But speaking of lovers, it must be me and darling, right? Looking at the aurora in the sky, the 2 girls took the blessing on themselves. The contradictory statement made Nu'a and Xia Luot frown at the same time, then they looked at each other. "Hey, what are you talking about? Don't forget that I was the one who lied." Cuff. "I'm saying that I let darling discover the mistake. You're just a bystander, you didn't even say anything." "I didn't say anything? Isn't it because of the plan?" I'm saying that it's because your speech was too surprising." Looking at the beautiful aurora in the sky, Nu'a and Xia Luot had a disagreement for the first time, and they started to quarrel. But hearing the first few words in their conversation, Luoya suddenly felt that something was wrong. Plan? Why do I feel like I've been tricked? The black-haired boy widened his eyes, looking at the two who noticed the change in his expression. Recalling the previous scene, he suddenly felt a strong sense of inconsistency. Wait, something's wrong, no. Not just a little, it's a lot wrong. Nu Air said that the relationship started when we were 9 years old. Is there such a thing? Starting when we were 9 years old, I've been avoiding you, right? And I do have feelings for you, and it's very strong. But lovers? We didn't even confess to each other, right? Usually, we don't spend much time together. As for intimacy, after so many years, we only kissed because of the treatment in the history fragment, right? What kind of lover was this? Thinking about it, I did have the identity of Xia Luo's fiancé and protection, but I don't think we were lovers. Xia Luo didn't say anything. Chapter 350. In the sky above Aberville, the aurora continued to blossom under the cheers of the people. On the steps outside the palace, the black-haired young man gazed at the pink radiance, and the anger in his heart gradually subsided as time passed. Nu Air and Xia Luo had admitted their mistake of deceiving him and apologized. After the commotion, Luo Ye gradually calmed down under their coaxing and pestering. But more importantly, he realized another more serious problem. It was indeed shameful and infuriating that he was tricked and even cried. But after the initial emotional outburst, Luo Ye recalled that Nu Air and Xia Luo racked their brains to trick him because they liked him. But because of this, Luo Ye couldn't help but think about a lot of problems. All along, Luo Ye's feelings had been drifting too much. When they were young, Luo Ye could still use age as an excuse. But as time passed, this situation couldn't be ignored anymore. It was a fact that Luo Ye and the girls around him weren't lovers. Because of this, he had been restraining himself from taking the initiative to get close to them. But it was also a fact that their feelings for each other were much deeper than lovers. They had gone through great hardships and were engraved in their bones. But it was precisely because of this that Luo Ye became more and more hesitant and didn't know what to do. The most fundamental reason was his instability. Of course, Luo Ye could accept all the good intentions of the girls. It was also ethically feasible. It wasn't anything new for a noble like Xia to have several wives. His father, Ka Dia, even encouraged him to have more children. But the fundamental problem wasn't this. It wasn't even the conflict between the girls. The fundamental problem was that if Luo Ye established a relationship with them and one day he suddenly disappeared for 2 hours and reappeared as a corpse, what should they do? Just like Xia's law, great power came with a price. The bloodline of the Akit family had brought him both glory and disaster. If Luo Ye's death in the historical fragment was only a guess in the past, then this time, after facing Plist, he had personally experienced the reality of it. Source Level 1. That was a powerful existence that he couldn't resist. Apart from that, the Witch Queen also brought him the problem of the uncertainty of the ancient gods. Everything told him that the historical fragment wasn't a gentle level-up checkpoint. Instead, it was a dangerous place where he could lose his life if he wasn't careful. Even Luo Ye himself had goosebumps at the thought of dying in front of his lover because of a historical fragment. Once this happened, perhaps even the strongest Nu Air wouldn't be able to bear the impact of his lover's death. As for Ai Lizzie, Luo Ye didn't even dare to think about it because she was too extreme. He didn't dare to touch or mention it, but his feelings were there, making it impossible for him to shake off the girl's hands. This was the reason why he had always gone with the flow. This time, when he was together with Lillian, he was also going with the flow. However, this attitude of neither admitting nor objecting was starting to get out of hand. Luo Ye's attitude due to the worry in his heart and the girl's urgent desire to establish a relationship with him had turned into a sharp contradiction. This incident was actually a microcosm of this, so he had to find a way to resolve it as soon as possible. The fear of sudden death and the irrepressible worry in his heart made Luo Ye shiver while he was deep in thought. Nu Air beside him was surprised to see this. Luo Ye, what's the matter? It's nothing. It's just a little cold. Nu Air's eyes slowly widened when she saw Luo Ye forcing out a smile. Xia Luo also realized that there was something wrong with Luo Ye, but when they saw Luo Ye's comforting smile, the two of them exchanged glances and didn't know what to say. Chapter 351. Luo Yaakat felt that today's aurora was meaningful. At least, it made him understand something. The girls wanted to establish a stable relationship with the constant danger brought about by historical fragments. This was a contradiction. But was this contradiction really unsolvable? No, there was a way, but it was a method that Luoya would never use in the past. Luoya wasn't sure if the bloodline ability could be actively turned off, but he knew that it was terrifying. There were no signs at all, and the mechanism was uncertain. After entering the historical fragment, it was unknown whether one would live or die. But one thing was certain, and that was the activation of the bloodline ability could be traced. The cheers of the crowd in the distance continued. On the steps of the palace, Nuair and Xia Luot became more and more uneasy in silence. Ai Lizi was rarely worried in front of Luoya. She intuitively felt that something was wrong with Luoya, but she didn't know what Luoya was thinking. She didn't know where to start. Time passed bit by bit. When Ai Lizi couldn't bear it anymore, Luoya finally withdrew his gaze from the sky. He looked at the girls in front of him, thought for a moment, and said, "Sorry, I made you worry." It's nothing, it's just... Big brother, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the problem I've always had." Looking at the worried Ai Lizi and Nuair and Xia Luot who were silently waiting for him, Luoya was moved. He sorted out his thoughts and said, "For so long, because of the danger of the bloodline ability, I've been subconsciously avoiding making some decisions. I don't want to implicate others, and I'm afraid of causing irreparable consequences. But the result is a kind of destruction to other people's hearts. I've unknowingly done a lot of such things. I'm sorry." Luoya. Hearing the black-haired youth's apology, the three girls had different reactions. Ai Lizi, who had always been focused on eating desserts, didn't have much of a reaction. Xia Luot felt something, but because they had only known each other for a year, it wasn't that strong. Only Nuair, Luoya's childhood sweetheart, who was rejected the most because of some special hobby, felt the deepest. But when she thought of the bloodline ability that Luoya mentioned, she couldn't help but frown. "Luoya, I know what you're thinking, but the bloodline ability can't be changed. Great power must come with a price. This is an iron law that can't be broken." Miss Angel said softly. Hearing this, Xia Luot's expression turned heavy. She had experienced the Golden Ship's adventure together with Luoya, so she was very clear about the historical situation. She also understood the youth's concerns. In front of Luoya, Ai Lizi frowned. She thought of the youth's bruises after activating his bloodline ability. Seeing the different reactions of the girls, Luoya's heart felt heavy. He paused for a moment and continued. "Yes, the balance between power and price is indeed an iron law. But what if I give up a part of the power?" Chapter 352. Under the aurora, Luoya stared blankly at the silver-haired girl in front of him. He still didn't understand the fact that he was the dessert. Beside him, the princess and young miss who were originally immersed in a relaxed and happy atmosphere also widened their eyes. Both of them fixed their gazes on Ai Lizi and were shocked. When a set of rules is established, most people's first reaction is to abide by it, but some people's first reaction is to find loopholes. Ai Lizi was a typical example in their hearts. To put it simply, this child doesn't care about martial ethics. Everyone is happy. Why is it that you're the only one who's different? You said that after graduation, why do you want to sneak away before graduation? But, if you think about it carefully, it seems to make sense. The blonde girl and the reddish-brown girl thought so and immediately discovered their previous blind spot. Luoya's solution was indeed not a problem, but in order to fulfill this agreement, he needed time to break through the possibility of controlling the bloodline, just like a carriage that just started running on the road. After setting the graduation time, the carriage naturally has a direction, and when it reaches the end, there will be delicious desserts to taste. Everything is fine, but the problem is, why do I have to share the carriage with others? Look at this road, it's long and wide, why can't a few people lie down? This carriage is not spacious, and there is only one dessert. If I kick others down, won't I be able to eat it alone at the end? Thinking of this, whether it was Xia Luot or Nuair, They stared at Luoya with unprecedented fervor. The relaxed and happy atmosphere created by the youth's long speech was destroyed by AI Lizi's words, and Luoya, who was in the middle of the situation, also felt that something was wrong. The black-haired youth blinked and looked at the three smiling girls beside him, and suddenly felt a chill down his spine. What kind of look is this? Did I say something wrong? Luoya was puzzled, and the three girls were thinking of their own plans. That's right, the outcome of this battle didn't need to be decided at the end. Wouldn't it be perfectly fine to kick someone off the stage to seal the victory? Regarding Akate's understanding of Roha, the girls present could be said to be experts, so they understood his biggest weakness, that is, he was slow when it comes to feelings. This slow doesn't mean that he can't perceive other people's feelings, but it means that he can't tell which is love, or it can be said that everyone hasn't reached that stage yet. Nua Ayer and Xiaoluo were close friends with Luoya. Their families also supported each other. AI Lizi and the young man relied on each other for survival and were spoiled to the bone. Their relationship with Luoya was indeed far beyond that of ordinary lovers, but in fact, everyone's feelings for him were a complex mixture, not pure to the point of love. Right now, Luoya's plan was just a plan to eliminate everyone's uneasiness, but it had nothing to do with reaching the top. Everyone was at the door, and whoever kicked in would win. As for sharing after winning, wasn't that a joke? Love is war. The loser eats the dust. Chapter 353. When the black-haired young lady suddenly appeared behind Luoya, the atmosphere in front of the main hall tensed up instantly. Nua Ayer, Xiaoluo, and AI Lizi stopped in their tracks at the same time, gazing at Lillian in disbelief. This woman is here? How is that possible? This thought flashed through their minds almost at the same time. And the reason was simple. Be it Nua Ayer or Xiaoluo, they had sent all their elites to intercept Lillian. They weren't sure about AI Lizi, who arrived later, but it should be about the same. In that case, the three parties had sent more than 5 powerhouses above the level of origin class to intercept Lillian. But even with such a powerful encirclement, it only lasted for such a short time? The black-haired young lady's powerful strength made the other 3 girls frown deeply. They naturally didn't know that the people they sent to restrain Lillian had already been restrained by Lillian, who had a large army under her control. Although Lillian was powerful, it was impossible for her to do anything in a short time in the face of so many elite troops from the Vatican, Lewis, and Akate territory. But even if they couldn't defeat her, they could still surround her. After all, no matter how many troops they had, they couldn't compare to Lillian. But it had to be said that Lillian didn't dare to act rashly after leaving behind a large number of troops to restrain the elite troops of the 3 girls. Although Lillian was furious with the sudden appearance of Luoya's adopted sister, AI Lizi, her strength was solid. Although she was only at level 4 of the origin class, her combat strength could reach level 3 of the origin class. As for Nua Ayer from the Vatican and Xiaoluo from Lewis, they definitely had their trump cards. Lillian wasn't sure how much explosive power they could unleash in a short time. Of course, the most important thing was Luoya's feelings and political factors. In front of the main hall, Lillian and the 3 girls looked at each other from a distance. But before they could speak, Luoya, who was being hugged, returned to her senses and broke the silence first. Senior sister, I have something to tell you first. After a long silence, Luoya mustered the courage to look at Lillian and said so solemnly. The black-haired young lady couldn't help but be taken aback. Lillian blinked and instinctively felt that Luoya seemed to have recovered some of his mind. Remember? At this thought, the black-haired young lady nodded and let the young man go. Luoya spoke softly about the series of decisions he just made, including the possibility of going into seclusion in the future. But what surprised him was that Lillian, who also had the bloodline of the Akate family, didn't react strongly to his thoughts. Of his thoughts instead, she narrowed her eyes and fell silent in silence. Luoya's dream was to have a stable family. This was a beautiful wish that any normal human would have. But it was a pity that in this world, apart from small families, there were also big families and the general trend of history. The Akate family produced many heroes. Was it really because they were born to be heroes? From a certain perspective, it was a combination of internal education and external environment that created heroes. Luo Ye grew up without any guidance. He understood the thoughts of the weak the best. That was why he couldn't stand the trampling of the weak by evil and calamity. His personality of hating evil and never giving in was actually the biggest unstable factor. When a disaster happened, when humanity as a whole was facing a crisis, the young man named Luo Ye would definitely step forward bravely. No matter how much he prayed for peace, he was still an achate in his bones. His kindness, justice, and benevolence were purer than most awakened in the Achate family. Of course, there was also the possibility that the human world was peaceful during the period Luo Ye lived in. But this possibility was very small after the appearance of the mutants at the human borders. Chapter 354. In the atmosphere that was so solemn that it sent chills down one's spine, a group of fully armed troops suddenly walked out from the shadows. They walked with their heads held high, and they stood out from the crowd. They were like the apostles of God, and their holy white robes were spotless under the moonlight. Their disdainful aura was revealed with their every move. The St. J Society. In the face of danger, they had stepped forward bravely. Luo Ye was stunned when he saw the sudden appearance of the group. The girls who were on the verge of exploding stopped and turned around. Under everyone's gaze, Francis puffed out his chest and nodded in satisfaction. The arrogance and compassion that belonged to the apostles of God was revealed on his face. The lost lambs would always show such a look when he appeared. It wasn't strange at all. After all, Francis also felt that their appearance was so sudden and unexpected, just like the precision and elegance of their swordsmanship. Launching a surprise attack during a festival was a tactic that could catch the enemy off guard. And today's situation was even more suitable for him to take advantage of the situation. Before he rushed over, Francis had carefully observed the situation and found that the capital of Aberville was unusually chaotic today. Not far away, a large-scale armed fight was going on. Judging from the nature of the curse power, it should be a conflict between the Holy See and the heretics. After a visual inspection, he also found the Loche gem magic and suspected the Austin Empire's army. When he saw this, he knew that the best opportunity had come. Religious conflicts, national hatred, these were all conflicts that couldn't be resolved. Once a war started, it wouldn't stop until one side was completely defeated. And this was the situation that Francis liked the most. Opportunities that could only be encountered by chance always came quietly, just like luck knocking on the door. It had to be said that Luo Ye, as a blasphemous sinner, was indeed cunning. He actually used a certain method to conceal himself from many curses, including prophecy spells. However, this method of concealing his whereabouts also blocked his escape route, leaving him empty. There were many forces that wanted to help him, but so what? Who else could find such a target other than them who had the Saint Envoy? And the facts proved this point. 1 source ranked level 3 and 3 source ranked level 4. This was the defensive strength of the targets under the hammer of the God Spirit, unable to withstand a single blow. Look, even he was trembling in fear. Looking at the trembling black-haired young man in front of him, Francis, who was confident in his victory, revealed a proud smile. However, he didn't know that in Luo Ye's eyes, he was the real saint hero, the only designated savior. What a group of cute people. Looking at the familiar white robes and the members of the Saint Hero Society under the moonlight, Luo Ye felt his eyes welling up. He looked at the girls around him, and noticed that Nua Iyer and the others were naturally vigilant. This group of people. Chapter 355. Under the night sky, when the Austin Empire's cavalry took the lead to attack the Saint Heroes Society's action team, Director Francis finally realized what was going on here. Previously, the Saint Heroes Society judged that Luo Ye Akat had entered a period of weakness. With the help of a few guards, she blended into the crowd to avoid trouble and cut off contact with all parties. However, based on the current situation, this statement was obviously wrong. The conflict between the Vatican and the infidels, the conflict between the Austin Empire and Locks, everything was just a show to lure them into the trap. This demon child even pretended to be harmless and acted innocent here. God, what kind of scheming was this? What a sinister and vicious person. Is this the enemy of God? At this time, in the sky, birds composed of curse power and vitality were flocking from the boundless moonlight. They followed the AI Lizzie's outstretched hand and guided the destructive curse to attack below. The silver-haired girl's eyes were as red as blood, and boundless killing intent mixed with the attack poured down. To put it simply, she was a bomb. The moment the AI Lizzie made a move, Francis was surprised to find that he was targeted by as many as 2 digits of Source Level 3 curses. Even with the strength of Source Level 2, it was difficult to resist so many attacks. After a short consideration, the middle-aged man chose to retreat, but he didn't know that such an action made him miss the best opportunity. Nua Iyer stretched her wings of light into her arms and took out a curse vessel containing crystal water droplets with layers of seals. Her hand touched the box-like curse vessel, and then she was surrounded by countless brilliance. Layers of brilliance surrounded her body and penetrated into her skin like silk. "Dear, come to me." On the ground, Xia Luo's golden souls began to surge like never before. The liquid curse vessel covered Luo Ya's defenseless body like a wave. Obviously, this amount was definitely not normal, but what shocked Luo Ya even more was that the golden souls surrounding him seemed to be abnormal too. Obviously, Lillian's powerful strength gave Nua Iyer and Xia Luo a lot of pressure, so the two came prepared this time. But perhaps even they themselves didn't expect that the preparation to deal with Lillian would become the Saint Heroes Society's death warrant. So what if her strength reached Source Level 3? In the end, she just barely reached her level. But was Lillian's strength really brought about by Source Level? In the sound of the horn, groups of light armor axemen rushed out in the light of Lillian's curse power and began to rush quickly toward the cultists who were confused by the cavalry's charge and AI Lizzie's indiscriminate bombardment. What righteous poisonous flying daggers and blackened poisonous spears. Anyway, they were all shameful things, but there was one thing that was very good, and that was the ability to kill others. Lillian did not forget what this battle was about. Now that the 4 families had joined forces, the end of this group of cultists had already been decided. But she was not here to kill the cultists, she was here to snatch Luo Ya. This woman has no morals. The liquid golden souls condensed and boiled in her hand, then turned into an undetectable golden wind under the aurora and swept in the direction of the Saint Heroes Society. They entered the nostrils and mouths of the cultists who were fighting fiercely, and then penetrated into their bodies. A shameless trap, a vicious weapon, and a sinister curse. "I'll kill you all." The middle-aged director, who was both sad and angry, burst out with a violent curse power, driving the battle into a white-hot state. In the distant buildings, several figures began to silently observe the commotion. Chapter 356. The distribution of war achievements was not easy to verify, especially when there were several forces mixed together, and the situation of fighting for the head began to appear. That was why Francis was scared. He did not know about the others, but he knew that he was being targeted. Therefore he chose to go all out. The highest belief of the Saint Heroes Society was the Mother Goddess, who possessed power far beyond that of ordinary gods. However, it was clear that even as a director of the Saint Heroes Society, the sleeping Mother Goddess would not pay attention to him. The directors of the Saint Heroes Society were well aware of this, but there was a problem that could not be ignored. They lacked the support of the gods with the highest combat power among the various sects and organizations other than the Shia Orthodox Church. And Francis was one of the rare ones who could communicate with the Mother Goddess and obtain a part of her power as a director of the Saint Heroes Society. Seeing such a horrifying scene, the soldiers present stopped in their tracks. Luo Ya, who was at the back of the crowd under the protection of the Golden Soul, could not help but shrink her pupils. Although Francis was still in pain, he pulled a smile on his face. Francis said as his body trembled. A large number of his bones were broken, causing his body to curl up. Together with the smoke that rushed out of his body, he looked like a broken bellows in the kitchen. However, to his surprise, after hearing his words, the black-haired boy in the distance was stunned. Then it's all right. When the black smoke of death rushed forward like the Grim Reaper, a wall made of steel shields suddenly appeared and firmly blocked the horrifying spell. At the forefront of the shield formation, a tall and slender woman was exuding a majestic and heavy power. She took the lead and launched a counterattack against Francis. In the past, Francis was almost invincible when using this method of attack. But now, although there was a little girl with the angel bloodline on the opposite side, her strength was far inferior to his. Therefore, he did not care and planned to deal with the others first. The Akkad army was guided by the gods to join Luo Ya's team. In order to better carry out the mission of protecting Luo Ya, the two ancient gods had also given them power and blessings. Behind her, Rodney and Wood also stepped out and began to attack. The middle-aged man whose body was glowing red had his muscles bulging. Under his use of the strength source substance, he demonstrated the most primitive aesthetics of violence through close combat. All the black ghosts that wandered around in front of Rodney were smashed into pieces by him. The huge skeletal hand opened its palm, and every time it smashed down, the ghosts formed by the black smoke would be smashed into pieces. The ground trembled under this huge force, and the originally flat square became a construction site. Since when was the strength of Akkad army? As the allies of the Akkad family, although the Vatican and Loche were surprised, they could still accept it. After all, in their eyes, the Akkad family had always been rich in martial arts. As an ally, the stronger the better. However, this scene in front of Lillian's eyes made her deeply shocked. Due to her ability, the girl who was more focused on military matters fell into deep thought. As for Francis, he was already dumbfounded. Why do I feel like I'm going to lose after this big move? Cynthia, you did well. Now, Big Brother is mine. AI Lizzie's excited voice was heard, and the girls who saw this magical scene suddenly came back to their senses. Not good, I'm going to lose. What should I do? If this goes on, Shio above. My palace. Do you desire wealth? The brown bear-like man blinked and looked up when he heard the familiar voice. In the light of the spell, Xia Luot Sorophia walked in front of him. The girl stretched out her hand, pointed at the Saint Heroes assembly in the distance, and said in irresistible persuasion, 100,000 gold coins, kill. Chapter 357. Under the light of the spell, Charlotte Sorophia's body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden light in the eyes of Duke Aberville, who was lying on the ground. That was the light of the spell, the light of brilliance, and also the light of wealth. There was nothing that money couldn't solve. If there was, it would mean that there wasn't enough money. As long as it was a problem that could be solved with money, it wasn't a problem. Duke Aberville gazed at the palace complex that had returned to its original state. He looked up at the goddess of wealth in a daze. Xia Luot repeated with a faint smile. The moment Duke Aberville stood up in silence, the entire sky in the northern region seemed to have risen by 3 inches. It was only at this moment that the astonished Luoya recalled the strength of this man who regarded wealth as his life and didn't dare to raise any opinions in front of the young mistresses. Before becoming the Duke of Aberville, this honest-looking man had once made a name for himself in the Austin Empire. But after returning to the country to inherit the title of Duke, decades had passed, and the man nicknamed Explosive Bear had gradually lost his temper. In other words, the prosperity of Aberville could be said to be directly related to the stingy and greedy dukes of the past. Can you convert it into resources? Deal. The moment the trade was completed, Oswald blew his whistle. After a long and penetrating whistle, the ground rumbled. In less than 10 seconds, a gigantic magical bear the size of a bus broke through layers of buildings, bringing along debris and gales. At the same time, a huge meteor hammer appeared in Duke Abwill's hand. Where did you get this thing from? Gazing at the weapon in Oswald's hand, the black-haired young man was dumbfounded. But what surprised him more was that it wasn't just the gigantic bear that was coming. More and more bear-riding warriors were rushing over from afar. With a loud roar, Duke Abowl rode a giant bear and charged into the battlefield with a meteor hammer. The Saint Heroes Guild, who had never provoked this bear ancestor, was completely dumbfounded. The giant meteor hammer whistled like the wind and lightning and smashed the head of a level 3 source rank cultist. Noelle could not help but condemn the reddish-haired young lady when she realized that there was a large group of new troops around her. However, Charlotte did not care at all. She kept firing with the jeweled trigger in her hand, the smile on her lips elegant and dignified. After receiving the blessings of the Goulandair and Paytila, Cynthia, Rodney, and Wood's body side effects were greatly reduced. The advantage of being cultists became more and more obvious. Although they were only level 3 source rank, as divine warriors, their combat strength had reached level 2 quasi-source. Looking at his subordinates who were about to die in the distance, Francis was burning with anger. Luo Yaakat, sinister, cunning, despicable and shameless. She looked like an innocent and harmless child, but her mind was so deep. Mother Goddess is watching me. Not good. Retreat. He's going to self-destruct. At this point, there was not much curse power left in Francis's body. However, as long as he sacrificed all his bones, he could completely convert the curse power into death aura. However, if he were to unleash his power aimlessly, the effect of the attack would not be ideal. However, it was more than enough to kill a child who did not have much supernatural power left in his body. Go to hell. Luo Yaakat. Boom! A violent explosion shook the sky. A black shockwave with the power to suck flesh and blood swept out and swept across the square. Chapter 358. When Francis leaped into the air and launched the final blow to kill Luoya, an unprecedented sense of crisis rose in the heart of the reddish-brown-haired girl. The moment Francis made up his mind, Xia Luo's bloodline fluctuated violently. The unique command of fate made the girl aware of the danger almost subconsciously. In the midst of Francis' hateful roar, the violent explosion with the black smoke with the attribute of God was imminent. Xia Luo, who was familiar with the similar curse mechanism, understood Francis' idea almost instantly and made an emergency response. In Xia Luo's rapid shout, the liquid golden soul instantly wrapped the black-haired boy's body and then ejected into the distance like an airbag. Luoya only saw a golden color in front of his eyes. The next moment, the violent acceleration made him plunge into the inner wall of the golden soul. Unlike the almost gaseous death attack, the golden soul was subject to great wind resistance and was not light. The result of such a race was almost obvious. In a few seconds, the wind of darkness approached step by step. However, just as the death attack was about to catch up with Luoya and give him a fatal blow, a strange spell fluctuation came from the black-haired boy's arms again. Remaining use, 1 second to remember. When the black-haired boy saw the system prompt, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, a violent shock suddenly descended, causing Luoya to be knocked around inside the golden soul. Boom! One. Enchantment. There's an enchantment here, and it's even an enchantment that can block this kind of divine attack. The boy, who had just experienced a crisis, blinked with a blank expression, then looked down at the system. He felt that his eyes were about to tear up. Blessed ear of rice, forever a god. But this place there's someone. In a beautifully decorated room, there was a pink-haired girl in luxurious clothes who was obviously not an ordinary person. She seemed to be pouring tea with a teapot in her hand, and there was a figure in armor beside her. In the silent room, Luo Yaakat stared blankly at the two people not far away. The reason for his attention was very simple. She had extraordinary powers and various races. Her body was strong because of mutations, and there were countless people with special abilities. Her hair was actually very colorful, just like the girls around Luoya. But it had to be said that even so, there were very few people with pink hair. Luoya paid attention to the pink-haired girl who seemed to be of a different race, but what surprised him even more was the figure in heavy armor beside her. The reason was simple: Luoya knew this person. Looking at the figure wearing heavy armor and observing Luoya with the pink-haired girl, The black-haired young man was stunned for a moment before he captured the information of this person in his mind. What was going on? Why was he here? Ah, wait, so that's how it is. Did he bring his girlfriend here to see the aurora? Aberville was indeed not far from the kingdom of Knights, Penda. I didn't expect to bump into him here. The black-haired young man who had this thought breathed a sigh of relief and stood up. When he was about to open his mouth to apologize politely and leave, he didn't expect a magnetic exclamation to suddenly come from the armor. In the room, hearing William's exclamation, the black-haired young man widened his eyes and his body instantly stiffened. Chapter 359. In a dark room without lights, the black-haired young man stared blankly ahead. The aurora outside the window penetrated the glass and shone on the figure in heavy armor and the pink-haired young lady, adding a layer of different dreamy colors to them. What's going on? He knows me? It was normal for Luoya to recognize Williams. After all, he had never met him before, but he knew a lot of people. Williams' features were so obvious that it was hard for him not to remember. However, it was too abnormal for Williams to recognize Luoya. If a person knew the previous Luoya, then there might be some unknown fate between them. But if a person knew the current Luoya, then the problem was too big. The last person who knew him was the Sage Society that wanted to kill him. I see. You must be frightened when I suddenly called your name. But don't worry, Luoya, we are your friends. Not bad. If your current state doesn't affect your memory, you should still remember our reminder in your dream. Hearing William's words, the black-haired young man couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. After a slight pause, Luoya immediately recalled the nightmare he had on the way to the northern region. Looking at his reaction, the pink-haired young lady picked up the pen on the table and wrote something on the notebook. Then she raised the notebook gently. Could it be that the one who spoke in the dream was you? Hearing this advice that always appeared at the end of the dream, Luoya stared ahead and couldn't help but ask in surprise. The pink-haired young lady didn't answer and only nodded again. Seeing this, Luoya fell into silence for a moment, and his tensed nerves relaxed slightly. It seems like the two people in front of me are really my allies, but why? Thinking of this question, Luoya raised his head and revealed a puzzled expression. As if sensing the young man's doubts, the figure in heavy armor spoke again. Treader of the Ancient Will? What are you referring to? Ever since Luoya learned of the existence of the Sage Society of the Twilight, this was the first time he heard this word from someone in this era. The black-haired young man could imagine what it meant. That's right, we are the descendants of the Twilight Sage Guild. Under the light of the aurora and the sparkling fireworks, the affirmative words entered the black-haired young man's ears. While he was shocked, he also sighed. Luoya had such a conjecture for a long time, but as he investigated the Philosophers' Association, he couldn't find anything. This contradiction made him suspect that he had guessed wrongly, but today William's words proved his conjecture right. Are you the descendants of the members of the Twilight Sage Society? How could he prove this? You should know that in this era, not only friends but also enemies know this name. Chapter 360. Inside the room, the black-haired boy and the pink-haired girl were both stunned when the figure in heavy armor spoke with a serious tone. I'm sorry, what do you mean by joining? The Dawn Council. Luoya thought when he heard the name of William's organization, but he didn't answer. His golden eyes looked at Williams in front of him, and he couldn't help but have a feeling in his heart. Although Luoya basically treated Williams and the others as his own people when he confirmed their identities, but even if they were relatives, it would take a few days for them to get familiar with each other. How long has it been since they met? They haven't even established a relationship of trust, and he suddenly said that he wanted to join an organization, as if he knew that his question was a little abrupt, or he realized that his introduction wasn't detailed enough. Williams was a little anxious. He thought for a moment and added, "The Dawn Council is not an organization that randomly recruits members. Instead, it has a referral system and strict examinations. However, for the descendants of the wise ones, the process is simplified. As for you, as an awakened of the Akot family, You are qualified to join the council directly. Williams explained and said his thoughts. However, Roja, who knew the truth, couldn't help but smile bitterly. Or rather, even if the person who opened this barrier was someone he didn't know, Luoya would still barge in. But of course, he wouldn't say that out loud. In the end, how should he politely refuse? Luoya? The sound of searching for Luoya came with the wind and gradually became louder. The three people in the room paused simultaneously. The black-haired boy tilted his head and looked out of the window. He didn't expect the battle to end so quickly. Luoya, who thought of the reason, came back to his senses. He turned around and looked at the messy room and Williams, who was in front of him. He immediately thought of a solution to this somewhat awkward situation. I'm very interested in the Dawn Council you mentioned, but as the acting lord of Akat territory, I can't make such a decision easily. I think it's better for us to discuss this matter further. What do you think? What's going on? Is there something wrong with what I said? Sorry, we don't want to have too much contact with the outside world for the time being. Luoya couldn't help but stare blankly at the words in Teresa's notebook. Williams was silent for a long time before he spoke again. Can't trust. You mean Nua Iyer and the others? I was indeed too excited just now. It's normal for you to be confused when I suddenly invited you. Just pretend that I didn't say those words before. But don't worry, we'll meet again soon. The heavy-armored man said and gently saluted. Before Roja could react, he put his hand on the shoulder of the pink-haired girl. Teresa held the book in one hand and gently waved at Roja with the other. Then she spoke for the first time since they met. Wait, you guys, the space spell was a rare spell that almost didn't exist in Shiya. How could it be activated with just one sentence? Such a thought flashed through Luoya's mind. What followed was a sudden explosion of light unique to the transfer spell. The black-haired boy couldn't help but cover his eyes with his hand. After a few seconds, the light weakened. Luoya slowly lowered his hand. Under the moonlight in the room, Williams and Teresa's figures had disappeared. Chapter 361. Luoya? That's great, you're fine. Asialo, you're here? Is the battle over? The reddish-brown-haired girl stared into the depths of the room where Luoya was staring and blinked her eyes in confusion. Feeling Xia Luo's confusion, Luoya thought for a moment but didn't say anything. Nothing, I'm just curious why there's a barrier around this room. Maybe it's a hotel rented by some big shot. He's probably watching the aurora in the Blessing Square, huh? It had to be said that the deterioration of the competitive environment had brought about an inward-looking effect. In this era where there was only one sweet spot, the girls would resort to all means to win, and they were becoming more and more unscrupulous. 1 second, remember this encounter with Williams and the others was a complete accident for Luoya, but in general, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. At least it allowed him to obtain a lot of information in advance that he didn't know before. Although a worldwide crisis that could be labeled as such hadn't appeared yet, having an organization to deal with it was naturally better than not having one. However, what made Luoya a little concerned was William's identity. The reason why the Twilight Sage Society was so strong was that it was an organization that transcended the concept of a country. Everyone's actions were for the benefit of the entire human race, and even the intelligent life groups. At times like this, everyone's cohesiveness and purpose would be very strong, and the power that erupted would be very concentrated. Luoya felt that this was an important reason why they could overcome crises one after another. Luoya didn't know the answer to this question, but he felt that this possibility existed, and it was very likely. Unless the royal family of the Kingdom of Knights, Pender, was selfless, it was inevitable that public resources would be used for private purposes. Moreover, their attitude of not wanting to come into contact with outsiders was very strange. In the game Eye of the Recorder, there weren't any members of the protagonist team in the encirclement of Luoya, only the male and female protagonists. This led to his main focus for so many years on Nua Iyer and the others, and basically didn't spend any effort on other people. Combining the game and reality, the teenager who understood William's actions sighed at the cowardice of the original Luoya, but then he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He suddenly remembered that before leaving, The armored warrior said that they would meet again soon. I admit that I was a little too hasty. Based on our previous interactions, he seems to be a person who is cautious about joining an organization. Yes, but originally, I thought that he had a chance to directly agree, but he failed. The feeling he gave me was a little different from what I had imagined. I can't describe it, but I feel like it conflicts with my ideals. Maybe it's just my imagination. This chance encounter with Luoya Akit was undoubtedly an unexpected situation, but this kind of encounter also had its advantages, and that was that both sides could see each other's true intentions without much preparation. Defining others based on your imagination and then being disappointed because they don't fit is not a good thing. Chapter 362. In the ruins of the Abbeville mansion, Luoya Akit was pondering over a mathematical problem of the century amidst the clamor of soldiers and the roars of war bears. The black-haired young man was engrossed in his thoughts. Behind him, the young ladies were in a mess. On the night of the silver moon after the aurora vanished, a silver-haired young lady pointed at the charred corpse of a cultist and questioned indignantly. The blonde young lady stood before her with a calm expression. She glanced at the corpse that AI Lizzie pointed at and retorted calmly. "You think it's yours just because you say so? What a joke. You used a sword to slash it? Then you should let your sword speak. I should be the one saying that to you. We killed that director named Francis, so it's only natural that we get the most credit." On the other side of the ruins, Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie were arguing over the issue of battle merits. The red-haired young lady was busy settling the bill for Duke Abbeville, Lillian was inspecting the corpse at the side, and Luoya was having a headache. As competitors, the girls naturally did not trust others. Therefore, the task of recording the results of the battle had been assigned to the four camps. However, the problem was that after the battle ended, the total number of enemies killed by the four camps was 77. However, the total number of enemies killed was only 69, including Francis, who had been blown into ashes. The moment this universal problem appeared, Luoya knew that things would be difficult. And the facts proved it. After the battle ended, Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie, who didn't have anything else to settle, started arguing. The other two young ladies probably did the same after settling their own matters. "Luoya, come here for a moment." Upon hearing Lillian's call, Luoya strode over after being taken aback for a moment. Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie, who were arguing, looked at each other and stopped arguing as well. The three of them arrived at Lillian's side with one in front and two behind. They found that the Royal Highness was looking down at a corpse on the ground. Luoya felt a chill in his heart when he saw Lillian looking down at the cultist. He thought that Lillian wanted him to judge the prize, but he didn't expect that after approaching, he found that Lillian's expression was very solemn. She didn't seem like she was going to protest at all. The black-haired young man heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that Lillian didn't seem to want to quarrel. Then, he observed the unsightly male corpse on the ground. Luoya scanned the corpse in front of him carefully and realized that this was the conclusion he could draw. But the black-haired young lady spoke with an unpleasant expression. "Similar? How can the bloodline of our family have?" Holy emissaries were a very special group of people in the Saint Heroes Society. They had a lofty status, but they did not necessarily have strong strength. One of the great significance of their existence was to be the key to open the so-called holy artifact in the Saint Heroes Society. 400 years ago, Leinster was the wind summoner's ith that had been absorbed by Luoya. Could it be that the so-called holy emissaries were actually artificially cultivated people with similar bloodline to the Akit family? This possibility does exist, but the bloodline of the Akit family is too special. What method is used? Hearing the young lady's question, Luoya didn't know how to explain for a while, but he understood one thing. That was, the so-called special curse vessel was definitely problematic. He remembered that the information of the Saint Heroes Society mentioned that it was similar to blood, so the source of this blood, Nua Iyer and AI Lizzie didn't know the current situation and seemed a little confused. It wasn't until the reddish-haired young lady came over that Luoya ended his contemplation, and the atmosphere eased. No, it's nothing. Xiao, how are the casualties on your side? Xia Luo, who strolled over, said and glanced at Lillian coldly. Luo Ye, who wanted to change the atmosphere, couldn't help but be stunned. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. As if confirming his guess, the black-haired young lady frowned when she heard Xia Luo's words. She thought for a moment, and after a moment, she curled the corner of her mouth and spoke back. What did you say? After seeing Aurora and defeating the cultist, Luo Ye, who was exposed, had no reason to stay in Aberville. Leaving was a matter of course, but just like the previous quarrel, where to go was a problem. In addition, the young ladies also discussed the allocation of time. Nua Iyer, who was at the bottom because she couldn't grab the kill, proposed such a statement to reverse the situation. However, this idea was fiercely resisted by AI Lizzie, who had the credit of killing Francis. But that's what you said. What if my dear doesn't want to follow the first place? Hee, AI Lizzie, do you still want to force him? What's the difference between that and the Austin kidnapper? Oh, who knows? Can your words be trusted? Are you kidding me? How can my brother not want to go home? No, my dear, you obviously want to go back to Rose with me. I'm officially hired. Don't you think so? My dear. Old woman, that's enough. My brother will definitely choose me. Isn't that right, my dear brother? Luo Ye's face stiffened as he looked at the young ladies who were gradually focusing on him. His strong desire to live made him feel as if he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Just when he was at his wit's end, the familiar fluctuation of the spell appeared again. Remaining use, 0. This is. Before the young ladies could finish their exclamations, Luo Ye's body had returned to normal. The familiar feeling of power once again descended upon him, and his brain felt much clearer. Holding the blessed ear of wheat that had lost its effect, the black-haired young man was very excited. Now, he could finally answer the young ladies' questions. Under the night sky, Luo Ye looked at the young ladies who were still in shock. Just like before, the corner of his mouth curled up and said calmly and gently, I'm going back to Leinster. I'm going back to Leinster. It's time for class. Chapter 363. Father, why do I have to wear these things? Armor, that was something a child of this age would naturally not like. Moreover, this kind of armor was accompanied by a certain degree of pain. It was natural for her to want to take it off. Very simple, according to the ancient prophecy of the Three Races Alliance, there may be a great calamity in the future. As the successor, you must obtain great power and hide your identity as much as possible. This armor was designed for this purpose. The man's answer was solemn and serious, but to the child's ears, it was no different than usual. The thin and weak child sadly lowered her head and said with a choked voice, You don't need to play, those noises will only weaken you, you only need to become strong. Silence once again filled the hall, as if feeling that his attitude was too harsh. After a moment, the man walked down from the throne, sighed and opened his mouth to explain. Oath. In other words, as long as I persevere until they reappear, it will be fine. The man pondered for a moment, reached out his hand and stroked the child's head, and smiled. In the dreamscape formed by the memories of the distant past, a name that had been forgotten for many years suddenly lingered in her ears, causing the sleeping girl to abruptly open her eyes and wake up with a start. Why did she suddenly think of her childhood? Was it because she took off her armor today? No, it's rare to take off my armor, I should have slept better. Is there a problem with my body? It was a healthy and beautiful body that had obviously undergone sufficient training. Slender and straight legs, a slim waist without any excess fat, a full chest, and a snow-white neck. At the top of the mirror, what was reflected was a dazzling and beautiful yet strangely dignified face. Draconic aura, this was the symbol of the royal family of knights with dragon blood hidden in her small body, the Khanate family. It was also one of the things that the girl had hidden from the public for many years. But regarding this characteristic of her family, Wilhelmina had always been quite fond of it. But unlike the usual William who exuded a suffocating and dignified aura, after revealing her face, Wilhelmina's temperament as a young girl underwent some changes. under the draconic aura, it was no longer oppressive and terrifying, but inviolable and noble. Wilhelmina checked her body that was almost perfect because of the dragon's blood. She found nothing. Frustrated, she walked back to her bed and lay down. She had to face the last possibility in her mind. Wilhelmina's heartbeat quickened as she recalled the young man she met under the northern aurora a while ago. She had to admit that the handsome Luoya would have a certain impact on any woman. Even Wilhelmina, who had always treated herself as a man, found it hard to escape. She even hastily sent out an invitation because of that. This time, I can't mess it up again. In the preparation room, a black-haired youth in formal attire was sitting on a chair, trembling as he looked at the letter that the Nuair and Xia Luot had received. Around him, the two youths who were deputy heads of the consulting department were trembling. After reading back and forth twice, Luo Yakat slowly stopped trembling. He raised his head and asked the two candidates in front of him softly with a smile. Hearing his words, the two suspects completely stopped pretending and began to drag each other down. Hearing Luo Ya's accusation, the dog-headed strategist Geralt slapped his thigh. His expression turned extremely sorrowful in a few seconds. He shook his head and sighed. Squeezing out the tears in his eyes, he said to Luo Ya. The gray-haired youth said so, sorrowfully and innocently, like a wronged ghost who was dragged into a car. But seeing him like this, Paul Ackman was dumbfounded. Is this a noble? How despicable and shameless! Paul Ackman, who had his hands dirted by Geralt, was stunned for a long time before he finally regained his senses. He turned around and put the blame on Geralt's head. He also revealed the theory of the gray-haired youth to the public. Following Paul's counterattack, the scapegoat competition between the two sides officially began. You wrote it yourself. You were the one who threw the mailbox. When did I say that they absconded to avoid punishment? Why are you slandering people out of thin air? That's elopement. How can it be called avoiding punishment? Luo Ya, who had been listening for a long time, couldn't help but interrupt the two clowns in front of him. He looked at the two people who were silent after hearing his words, thought for a moment, and sighed helplessly. It was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When there was a problem, the two didn't pretend to be indifferent. Instead, they actively acted to help Luo Ya. There was no doubt that there was a decisive difference, especially when the problem was the elopement of the Austin Empire's princess and Luo Ya. This was a big deal, and it was definitely not good to get involved. Fortunately, Luo Ya and the others came back early. If they came back later, Paul would be ready to carry out the so-called Plan B. By then, the matter of him and Lillian eloping and having a child would be widely spread, and it would become an established fact. It would probably be as noisy as the Jiangnan leather factory. The black-haired youth thought for a moment, looked at the two youths and said softly, "Hey, clean up?" Hearing Luo Ya's punishment, after sighing, Paul and Jellic were taken aback. They obviously didn't expect the punishment to be so light. The black-haired youth raised his eyebrows and said with a weird expression, No, I think cleaning up is good." Listening to the two clowns, Luo Ya shook his head helplessly. He stood up and walked to the door under the gaze of the two. Luo Ya said and opened the door. The next moment, cheers and applause from the outside poured into the room. In the wave of voices, the black-haired youth turned his head and looked at the two stunned people with a smile. After all, tonight belongs to us. Chapter 364. Tonight, Luo Ya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson welcomed their first night in St. Freya Academy. Dean Antonio, whose white beard was almost touching the ground, was in high spirits. He wore a white robe with golden threads that he would only wear during a grand ceremony. He stood in the center of the auditorium and spoke to the students. In the face of such a report from an unknown source, Luo Ya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson didn't ignore it. Instead, they used it as a clue and worked hard to find out the truth. They also joined forces with the security department, which was still in conflict at that time, to observe for several days and successfully destroy the hidden cultist organization in the academy. As soon as Dean Antonio finished his words, the auditorium immediately erupted in thunderous applause. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach exchanged smiles and stepped onto the stage. That's right. Senior Lillian actually smiled. Such exclamations spread among the students of the Austin Empire, which made those who heard some rumors couldn't help but suspect the relationship between Lillian and Luoya. On the other side of the stage, a black-haired, blue-eyed young lady in a formal dress held a box in her hand and waited for Luoya. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach walked to the front of the stage and lined up in a row. Dean Antonio personally presented the medal to the latter two, while Luoya, who was at the front, had the medal pinned on his chest by Melty, whom he had personally rescued. No, this is what I should do. Protecting an upright and kind person like you and maintaining order in the academy is my responsibility as a preceptor. Sir Luoya, I'm from the Austin Empire. Can I join the Blue Rose faction? Upon hearing Melty's request, Luoya smiled and replied. The young lady was touched. The girl said with tears in her eyes. The next moment, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed Roja's cheek under the watchful eyes of everyone. Oh. Although it was permissible for a lady to kiss on such an occasion, it still required a lot of courage for an Austinite to do so. Therefore, Luoya wouldn't avoid it even if he knew about it. Otherwise, he would become a fool who embarrassed the lady. In terms of publicity, this kind of behavior could also play a positive role. The award ceremony came to an end with Luoya and the other two as the finale. However, the enthusiasm of the students in the audience was even higher than before, because it was not the end of the ceremony, but the celebration banquet organized by St. Freya Academy, which was one of the reasons why many people came here. Such a luxurious store lineup could be considered a gourmet exhibition. It was too attractive for foodies, especially for a certain black-haired young man. Walking along the corridor leading to the banquet hall, Luoya Akit looked at the excited students rushing to the rows of tables. He tried his best to suppress his desire to eat. Nua Iyer, who knew him well, couldn't help but laugh. On the other side, Xia Luod also tried hard not to laugh. Hey, you're a prince after all. Can you not be so embarrassing? This is Vivian's Surprise Restaurant's Rainbow Truffle Roast Chicken. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.